Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we're kind of now entering the idea of post-Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, with us entering this part of the X-Men coverage, you're going to see a huge change when it comes to the roster of the X-Men. And really, you kind of tell that this was Marvel just trying their best to keep everything alive for the X-Men, and not in a bad way. What I mean by that statement is that for the X-Men roster, it kind of been the same for a good while since the idea of the two different X-Men teams, a brand new X-Factor team, Excalibur, Generation X. Like the roster was kind of the same for a good while. And so the idea of Marvel saying late 1990s, let's go ahead and remove some characters, but bring in new characters as well is a pretty good move for me personally, because now you have Dr. Reyes, you got Maggot, and you also now have Marrow as well joining the team. Now, this storyline does kind of jump back and forth between two different things going on with the two different X-Men books, because we are covering the main Uncanny X-Men book. We're also covering X-Men as well. Now, as we get into the opening pages for X-Men issue number 71, we're really sitting down with the idea of us talking about, well, Cyclops and Jean Grey leaving the X-Men, but also the two characters kind of feeling nervous about getting on a plane. Now, the main reason why the X-Men are losing Cyclops and Jean Grey, because at the end of Operation Zero Tolerance, we had discovered that Bastion had put a bomb inside the body of Cyclops. And so with that happening, of course, that means the possibility that he was going to die. But at this point, though, the bomb has been removed thanks to Dr. Reyes. And really, for Dr. Reyes, she does play somewhat of an important role in the middle chapter of this video. But it's the two characters saying right now they need to leave the X-Men and kind of help Cyclops recover, but also kind of like a mini vacation away from the X-Men. Now, earlier I kind of mentioned that the roster is going through a major change. And here's the reason why, because in the early 1990s, we were introduced to this 14-man X-Men team roster. Now, over time, you would have different characters leave for like a short period of time, but they'll come right back. But in the late 1990s, you really had Marvel go through a huge change when it came to the X-Men roster. And let me explain. Rogue is right now kind of going through a lot. And the reason why, because she had just discovered that Gambit was partially responsible for the idea of the mutant massacre. And so when she found out that, you had Rogue just kind of move away from the X-Men. Not completely, but she's kind of like in the background. Now for Gambit, he's also gone. With the idea of finding out that he had a role in the mutant massacre, for the X-Men, they're kind of like, we really can't trust Gambit around the team. And you also have Cyclops and Jean Grey now leaving as well. So all those different characters kind of being pushed off the team, including Psylocke and Archangel, and you'll see here in a moment, like, well, maybe the middle chapter. But anyways, with all these different characters leaving, you have Maggot joining, Marrow joining, and Dr. Reyes. So three new X-Men have joined the team and kind of helped the team out. And we're kind of left to wonder, how well will this truly go? But I kind of want to go ahead and shift over to Wolverine and also Storm, because for Wolverine and Storm, they do kind of express the idea of the concern about the new members of the X-Men. But really, when it comes to Wolverine, he kind of feels like they should go ahead and decline the actual offer they had given Maggot, Marrow, and also Dr. Reyes. Now for Storm, as we all know, even though it does truly bother her, she still wants to give them a chance to see what they can truly do. But for Logan, that is a complete no. Now, also for Logan, he hates the idea of Jean Grey leaving. And I kind of realized after reading all these different X-Men books, like, yes, Jean Grey loves Cyclops. Cyclops loves Jean Grey. But it's clear as day that Jean Grey loves Wolverine and Wolverine loves her. And Jean Grey would leave Scott if she could and get with Logan. I'm sorry. Like, it clearly shows that she would leave Cyclops if she could, because every once in a while, she does flirt with Logan, clear as day. But either way, you do have Cannonball take Maggot and also take Dr. Reyes into the city. Now, I want to shift over to Sebastian Shaw. Now, for Sebastian, we have not covered a storyline involving him and Cable, but for Sebastian, he's kind of trying to do all these different moves, bring back the Hellfire Club inner circle, also trying his best to make a profit off a possible cure of the legacy virus. And the list goes on and on. But then out of nowhere for Sebastian, he's then confronted by this mysterious character. And this guy was able to stop time to give Sebastian a note. Now, with that note, there's also a symbol, the symbol of apocalypse. And let's not forget, the dude has not been around since the Onslaught event. And technically, he was only in like 3 or 4 chapters at that whole event, and that was really it. And so now it's Marvel saying, hey guys, we're going to go ahead and bring Apocalypse back in the picture. Things are soon going to pop off for the X-Men. But we get back over to the X-Men. Really, we get back over to Wolverine as he has this conversation with Cyclops. And I kind of like this a lot because for these two characters, they're kind of like brothers, Over time, they have built a bond with one another. But for Wolverine, it's him saying, like, we can't trust these 3 new people to join the X-Men. Now, for Cyclops, he does bring up a good point. He's kind of like, dude, listen, when Charles Xavier had brought you in, I called you a wild card. I tried my best to remove you. And the thing was, you have proved me wrong, that you are one of the best X-Men we had over time. And I'd rather have you by my side no matter what. But it's also Wolverine saying like, yeah, I was a wild card, but you still kind of knew what I stand for. The thing is, for Maggot, we don't know anything about him. Only Joseph, which is Magneto, who has forgotten his past, can vouch for Maggot. And for Marrow, well, she was part of Jeany Nation, who are trying their best to kill off the human race. The only person who's right now joining the X-Men they could actually trust is Dr. Reyes. And that is really it. But for Scott, he kind of feels like even though him and Jean Grey are leaving, the X-Men are in good hands at the moment. Now, this storyline does take place after the idea of the heroes of the Marvel Universe coming back to the main Marvel Universe. And what I mean by that is the Avengers and Fantastic Four, they were pushed into a completely different reality called Heroes Reborn. So when it came to the public in the main Marvel Universe, they believed those heroes had officially died. But in reality, they were just in a different reality. But either way, it's now the X-Men finding out the Avengers and the Fantastic Four have officially returned to the main Marvel universe. But as we're closing the first chapter, we do kind of shift over to a character who's unknown to us, but it's this guy trying to deliver a package to Storm. Now, this guy is in Egypt, so of course, he's trying his best to get the package on the plane so that it'll get over to Storm, leaving us wondering what in the world is in that package. Now, while you have the X-Men out there shopping for a few things, the new X-Men, we're kind of given this idea that we can't trust Maggot at all. And the reason why, because there was this homeless guy who kind of heard something in the alley. When he goes down the alley, he is killed off. And we're kind of getting the idea that it's those small creatures that are with Maggot who had possibly killed off that homeless man. But either way, this all leads into the idea of where you're going to have Cyclops and Jean Grey leave the school of Charles Xavier. And you have everybody watching them leave. Now, while they are leaving, down in the basement area of the school, we do pick up with Marrow. Now, when we do, it's Marrow being confronted by Wolverine. And this is Logan saying like, okay, fine. If you're going to be an X-Men, it's now time for you and I to have your first teaching moment, your first session with the X-Men, especially with me, Wolverine. So now we're kind of getting the idea of Marrow versus Wolverine. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and jump over to Uncanny X-Men issue number 351. And the reason why, because this issue is really more of Dr. Reyes trying to figure out, like, what is her next move? Like, what is she going to do when it comes to her life being on the X-Men? Because in the last chapter, you have the different members of the X-Men kind of say, like, hey, welcome to the team. We also learned that she helped Cyclops with the whole bomb situation. But fasting forward a tad bit here, we now kind of see that she wants to leave the X-Men. And really, that kind of makes a lot of sense for her character, and let me explain why. Because for Dr. Reyes, when she first appeared in the middle of Operation Zero Tolerance, we had no idea that she was a mutant until, well, a later chapter. And then you had Iceman appear to help protect her from a Prime Sentinel. My point is that when it comes to Dr. Reyes, even though we learned that she was a mutant, that Charles Xavier wanted her on the X-Men a long time ago, but she had declined his offer, he also did promise her that no one would find out that she was a mutant. Now, of course, unfortunately, people did find out. But for Dr. Reyes, she had no idea that she wanted to be on the X-Men. For her, it's kind of like, no, I just want to be a doctor. I want to help out people in the hospital. And so after Operation Zero Tolerance, you had Dr. Reyes stay with the X-Men, but now it's her leaving the X-Men. And really, you have Storm not even try to stop her at all, because Storm's kind of like, listen, you did help us out by help saving Cyclops' life, and that's great and all, but we're not going to stop you. If you want to leave, okay. If you want to stay, that's even better. And so you do have Logan be that guy to take her back over to the hospital. But once she does arrive at the hospital, this kind of leads into a problem, and let me explain. Because for Dr. Reyes, when she does arrive at the hospital, she's confronted by Dr. Gibbons. Now, for Gibbons, he knows, like, hey, she wants her job back. That's great and all. But the problem is that he can't really promise her job back. And the reason why, because when she first appeared in the middle of Operation Zero Tolerance, she was at work at the hospital. The idea of the Prime Sentinel shouting out loud, Dr. Reyes is a mutant, means the staff now knows that she is a mutant. But for Dr. Gibbons, he's kind of like, listen, we have patients here. I have a staff here. With the idea of you being a mutant could put my people's lives in danger, but also the patients as well. Now for Dr. Reyes, is her saying like, listen, I'm not a big time mutant, meaning that not a lot of folks out there in the world truly know who I am and what I am, which means most likely your hospital will be perfectly okay. And so for Dr. Gibbons, he's right now giving her a trial run. But while we have that going on, we switch over to Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now, for these two characters at the moment, they're currently on a plane heading over to Alaska for their vacation. But while on the plane, you didn't have Jean Grey realize there's something else on the plane with them. Now, this will become very important in later issues of the Uncanny X-Men. Unfortunately for this issue, we do truly focus more on Dr. Reyes being on the X-Men team. And speaking of Dr. Reyes, we do see her go through one of those obvious situations in this book where you have Dr. Reyes about to do surgery on a patient. The problem is that out of nowhere, she is pulled from that surgery. Why? Because somebody on her team informed the family of her patient that she is a mutant. And for that family, they really do express the idea that they don't like a mutant working on their family member. And Dr. Gibbons tell her like, hey, listen, somebody on your team did inform them that you are a mutant. So that right there is a problem, because now that means anytime she has a patient, they're going to tell them like, do you know that Dr. Reyes is a mutant? But even though Dr. Reyes is a mutant, it's still her saying like, I have people to help out here. Because as she walks around the hospital, she finds another patient who's just like dying in front of her. And so she has no choice but to go ahead and help out that patient. And so really it does show no matter what happens, she's very devoted in doing her job. But after all of that, when you do have Dr. Reyes try to sit down with people at lunch, they all move away from her. It's the idea that like, hey, she's a mutant. A lot of folks on the staff right now truly hate the idea that she is a mutant. Now, the whole mutant thing continues on because right after lunch, you did have Dr. Reyes be called in by another doctor, and that would be Dr. Loran. Now, for Dr. Loran, he was somebody who apparently hated Dr. Reyes prior to the idea of finding out that she was a mutant, but apparently he needs her help. And the reason why? because their next patient is no other than Pyro. Now, it's the idea that because she's a mutant, most likely she can help this other mutant out. And the thing is, she can, but she hates the idea. The only reason why they called her because she is a mutant. Now, for Pyro, as we all know, in the early 1990s, he was kind of going through the storyline where he had the legacy virus, and he still does at the moment. But either way, he was shot, and I feel like his wound came from a storyline over in Daredevil. But either way, you do have Dr. Reyes go out of her way to begin the process of helping Pyro. Now, down at the docks, we do see that apparently there's some kind of shipment coming in. The thing is that in one of those boxes, there is some kind of creature that breaks out of its box. Now, we're not really told what's inside that box or what kind of creature it was, but apparently that creature is now out on the loose at the moment. Now, getting back over to Dr. Reyes, we see her be confronted by Daredevil. Now, when it comes to Daredevil, he came to her to get medical help because, well, he got shot. But the thing was, for Matt Murdock, while you had Dr. Reyes helping out different patients over time on her shift, you had Daredevil realize that she is a mutant, but a good mutant and also a good doctor. And so he does go to her to help get his, wound taken care of. But while you have Dr. Reyes treating him, it's also Matt Murdock beginning the process of putting Dr. Reyes on the right path. He's kind of like, listen, you are a doctor, and that is great and all. But the thing is, in this world, there are doctors everywhere to kind of help someone out with their medical needs. But there's not that many heroes at the moment. So why not try to use your abilities to help out people, but in a different way? It's him saying like, hey, you should go ahead and rejoin the X-Men because that right there is probably the best thing for you. And so once you have Dr. Reyes being able to treat Matt Murdock, you did have Dr. Reyes go ahead and free Pyro. And the reason why she freed him because once he is fully healed up, they were going to arrest him. And so for Dr. Reyes, she went out of her way to help Pyro get away. Now, once he does leave, you did have Dr. Gibbons fire her because of that. But for Dr. Reyes, she was going to quit either way. And the reason why, because she realized if she had stayed there, this staff, this job was going to go ahead and put her through so many hoops because the idea that she is a mutant. So you had Dr. Reyes officially quit the hospital and she goes back over to the X-Men. And it's kind of cool because at the end of this chapter, you have Storm there and you have Storm kind of like, oh yeah, I totally knew that you'd be back here. So welcome back to the X-Men. Now, as we dive into Uncanny X-Men issue number 352, we do pick up with Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now, for these two characters, they were currently working their way over to, Alaska by taking a plane for their vacation, right? But while on the plane earlier in the last chapter, for Jean Grey, she kind of realized there was something else on the plane with them, but she had no idea what it was just yet. Well, now, while on the airplane, you have another aircraft trying to attach itself to, the original plane. And for Cyclops and Jean Grey, they're kind of wondering what in the world is going on here at the moment. Now, the thing is, while you have our two characters wondering what's happening, you did have this one guy begin to freak out. And the reason why, because this guy believes there's someone coming after him. Now, you do have the staff on the plane being able to grab him and kind of begin the process of him calming down, but we're kind of left to wonder what in the world had freaked him out so much like that in the first place. Now, earlier, I did mention the idea that the X-Men are currently going through a lot at the moment. Like, the roster is changing a lot. And the reason why I said that earlier, because, when it comes to the X-Men, you still have them trying to rebuild a school after Operation Zero Tolerance. But you did have Archangel arrive. Now, Archangel arrived. Apparently, he did call the X-Men saying that he'll stop by to help fix the place up. But that was 2 days ago. So when he does arrive, you have Logan being very mad about the idea that Archangel is just now arriving. Now, for Archangel, he has also been going through a lot when it comes to Psylocke in the Crimson Dawn. Now, unfortunately, there was a miniseries out there for those two characters, but I can't really find it anywhere for me to cover. And so right now for the Archangel and also Psylocke, they're kind of away from the team. Archangel still tries to be on the team, but once you have Logan express how angry he is that Archangel, to his mindset, is basically useless, for Archangel, he's out. He's like, you know what? I'm not going to stand here and take this. And so he officially leaves the team as well. So just like that, the X-Men has lost another member. But getting back over to the plane, we do learn like who is trying to take over the actual aircraft. And that would be AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics. Now, when it comes to AIM, what they're trying to do is find that creature. And apparently that creature or being belongs to two other people on the plane. Now, these two doctors who I guess own the being, while you have AIM confront them, it's AIM saying like, you need to show us where it is at so we can go ahead and take it and leave. Now the two doctors inform AIM like you can't take it because the container was rigged to blow if anybody tries to take it without my permission. And so just like that, if AIM does try to remove it, this plane is going to blow up. Now, while you have a few things happening, you have Jean Grey being able to sneak her way down into the cargo area. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and shift back over to, well, the X-Men. The reason why, because for Cannonball, he does get a letter from Tabitha, better known as Meltdown or Boom Boom. Now, this could be the idea of Cannonball officially leaving the X-Men behind. And the reason why I'm saying that because it's her saying like, I want to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time. Like, let's just spend a few days together. And so just like that for Cannonball, he's out. He flies away. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and end the video on the note where this book ends. And the reason why, because I kind of want to say the whole idea of Wolverine versus Marrow for the next video after you do that storyline and one after that one as well. But anyways, when it comes to Cyclops and also Jean Grey, you do have the two characters trying their best to stop AIM. Now, while they're trying to do that, you have Firebird, this powerful creature that's locked away at the moment, being able to enter the minds of different people. Now, this is kind of cool because we do learn that when it comes to Firebird being able to enter your mind, it does bring out your worst fears from your past. Like, for example, the idea of Cyclops losing Jean Grey when she was turning into the Phoenix. Now, as we all know, that technically Jean Grey at that time did not turn into the Phoenix. It's a long story. But either way, you do have AIM try to leave. Now, when AIM does try to leave, they do clip the plane. So, of course, right now, the plane is beginning to go down. And so you have Jean Grey being able to properly talk to Firebird. Now, when she does, it's really more Jean Grey convincing Firebird to help out with this situation. Like, hey, listen, the plane is going down. Can you help us? And you have Firebird kind of like, yeah, you know what? I think I can possibly help you here in this situation. And so just like that, you do have Firebird use as many powers to help calm down the people on the plane, but to also help the plane land safe and sound on the ground. Now, after doing that, you then have Department H appear and they say, hey, you know what? It's now our job to go ahead and take this being away. Now, for Cyclops and Jean Grey, they're kind of wondering how in the world did Department H come back into the picture again? And they kind of feel like they should tell Wolverine. But for right now, they are going to go ahead and enjoy their vacation away from the X-Men. Okay, so I kind of want to sit down and cover X-Men Unlimited issue number 16. And here's the reason why, because this issue was something I really did not expect when it came to the actual cover of this issue. Like, honestly, at first I kind of thought like, oh, it's going to be one of those usual Wolverine versus Sabretooth storylines. So where could this possibly go? No, I was completely wrong about that idea. And here's the reason why, because it's the whole idea of what if, you know what, actually, hold that thought. You'll see what goes on in the rest of this video. So getting into the opening pages of this storyline, we do pick up with Wolverine paying a visit over to Archangel. And when it comes to Archangel, as we all know, he has his own company. Now, technically, he did inherit the company from his family, but it's still his company. And when it comes to Archangel, he does try his best to make sure the company is running well. Now, when it comes to Wolverine, this visit is not one of those like, hey, buddy, you and I are good friends visit. It's really more of like, hey, Archangel, I'm really upset with you. Now, if you saw one of my earlier videos, really, I want to say like the Uncanny X-Men and X-Men videos, we have talked about the idea of Cyclops and Jean Grey officially leaving the X-Men. And so with them gone, it's kind of Storm and also Wolverine in charge. And for Wolverine, he was kind of upset about the idea of Archangel not being around to help the X-Men out. Now, the reason why, because him and Psylocke, they had their own adventure when it came to the Crimson Dawn storyline. Now, with all that being said, when it comes to Wolverine, the reason why he's here right now paying this visit is because apparently he got in word that Archangel is creating or recreating a new version of Forge Neutralizer. Now, this was an item that we had talked about when it came to the very beginning of our coverage over the X-Men, and let me explain. You see, in the 1980s, right before the Mutant Massacre storyline, you had Forge introduce this new device that had the ability to take away someone's powers, a mutant powers. And so when it came to Storm, unfortunately, she had lost her abilities thanks to her new boyfriend at the time, Forge. And it was really a major storyline for X-Men comics. Now, what Wolverine is saying right now is that Archangel has one of his facilities in, I want to say North or South Carolina, currently working on a new version of Forge Neutralizer. If that's the case, that is a major problem because what if that type of item falls into the wrong hands? That item could be used against countless numbers of mutants across the world. Now, for Archangel, he cannot believe in the idea that his company is currently working on that type of weapon. And so you have Archangel leave to go check out this facility, and you have Wolverine go with him. But now we kind of have to jump back in time and kind of figure out what led into this moment because we do pick up with Wolverine. Now, when we do, it's really more of us now seeing Logan just trying to, well, relax. He's right now in Colorado just snowboarding, or really skiing, sorry. Now, while doing that, he does run into Sabretooth, who's currently holding on to this random woman. This begins the other plot line and kind of slides into the main plot line we saw in the present day. And really, as we transition back over to the present day, we're really picking up with, well, Wolverine and Archangel arriving at this facility. Now, when they do arrive at this facility, you do have Archangel try his best to show Wolverine around. Now, when he does, at first, it's really more Archangel saying like, look, Wolverine, I'm showing you everything. This facility is not as dangerous as you thought it was. Like, there is no future version of Forge Neutralizer that's currently being held inside this facility. But for Wolverine, he's kind of like, listen, Archangel, I definitely know there's something going on here. But we also get the idea that the way Wolverine is talking to Archangel is just straight up rude. Like they have no connection at all. And technically that's not true because for Archangel and Wolverine, they have fought alongside with one another for a good amount of time by this point in Marvel Comics. But right now, it's Wolverine kind of like, no, I have no actual reason to trust you right now. And this kind of leads into us finally learning about what's truly going on here when it comes to Wolverine and that Sabretooth part we saw earlier. So as we do transition back to the past, we do pick up with Wolverine fighting against Sabretooth. The problem is that you have Wolverine win that battle very easily. And so for Wolverine, kind of wondering, okay, what are you truly up to, Sabretooth? Like, what do you have planned here at the moment? And that is when you have Wolverine get attacked by Agent Who. Now, for Agent Who, we don't get the chance here to learn much about her character in the storyline. We do learn like who she's working for, but also the fact that like she is a mutant. Now, for right now, we don't get the chance to learn who she's working for until the very end of the storyline. But for Agent who is a mutant, she has the ability to mind swap people. So that right there tells you where this story is going. Of course, Wolverine and Sabretooth mind swap. And when it comes to Sabretooth, the reason why he's doing this for because he needed a way to get inside the facility that belongs to Archangel. He knew he could not be himself. So why not be Wolverine? Somebody who has close bonds with Archangel. And so with that being said, that's how he's now able to get inside the facility. And so as we transition over to the present day, we do pick up with Wolverine, Sabretooth, and also Archangel still walking around facility. And you then have Wolverine, who's right now Sabretooth, go ahead and show this hidden part of this facility that Archangel supposedly never knew about. Now, for Wolverine, he wants to go ahead and kill off these people. But for Archangel, he's all like, no, there's no way I am going to allow you to kill people, one, but also kill people who work in my facility, even though I have no idea who they truly are. Now, once you do have Archangel try to stop Sabretooth, who's in the body of Wolverine, you have Archangel realize this is not Logan, that this is Sabretooth. Now things get even better because you then have Wolverine arrive, but as Sabretooth. Now, for Sabretooth here, he's kind of surprised to see Wolverine. The reason why, because after you had Agent Who switch their minds, he had Sabretooth attack his own body so that Wolverine would not really be able at first to use the body of Sabretooth. But of course, for Logan, the dude is not a quitter. Now, while you do have the three characters fight against one another for a brief moment, you then have Sabretooth run away into a different room. And when you have our two heroes follow him, well, they see the neutralizer. So yes, it is confirmed here that Archangel's company was secretly working behind the scenes when it came to creating a new version of Forge weapon. But this kind of leads us into the ending of the storyline because once you do have Archangel go out of his way to get rid of this prototype, the question is right now, did Archangel knew about the prototype? Of course, he says no, but like, can we actually trust his word at the moment? Now, while you do have Sabretooth and Wolverine fight against one another, you didn't have the two characters being able to go back into their original bodies. Now, we're also kind of given the idea that for Sabretooth, the reason why he came here because he was hired to, but at the same time, it did sound like he was somewhat concerned about the idea of a weapon like this being built, being out there in the world to be used against mutants, but especially used against him. Now, the story does shift over to Sebastian Shaw and also, well, Agent Who. We do learn that she's working for him. It is also her now informing him like, hey, when it comes to Sabretooth, he was supposed to recover the item and bring it over to Sebastian. As we all know, for Sebastian, this is a man who technically does care for the mutant race, but does not at the same time, unless he's actually able to make, money. But it's also Sebastian right now trying to rebuild the inner circle of the Hellfire Club. But either way, the book does kind of end on that note. Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the Uncanny X-Men, I kind of want to sit down and cover Uncanny X-Men issue number 353 and 354. And the reason why, because this kind of gives us the idea of post-trial of Gambit, but also what you had Marvel try to do when it came to the character of Rogue, but also the same thing for the character of Gambit as well, possibly leading into his own solo series once again. But getting into the opening pages of Uncanny X-Men issue number 353, We really do go at Rogue having this nightmare. Now you can kind of tell it's a nightmare how the way this opening pages go for this part of the storyline, but it's also the idea of us seeing Rogue attacking Wolverine in a way where like she wanted to take his powers away. She wanted to get inside his mind and kind of learn his past. But also like she had another plan for the idea of Wolverine's powers in his past. Because in the opening pages, at first, she's kind of giving herself a quick rundown like, does she really want to do what she's going to do? But then out of nowhere, she begins to absorb the powers in the memories of Wolverine. And this kind of leads into a small battle between the two characters. Now, it's also the idea for me personally that Marvel had plans to kind of reveal the idea of the son of Wolverine. And the reason why I'm saying that because in this nightmare that Rogue is having, she basically says that when she went into his mind, she had discovered that he had a son out there that he never told anyone about. But either way, the battle does kind of end with Wolverine killing Golf Rogue. Now again, this is a nightmare, a dream. And so of course, she does wake up freaking out. But once you do have Rogue wake up, she's then confronted by Storm. Now, for me personally, this is kind of like, okay, Storm being the big sister for Rogue, which honestly, it always felt like that, with Storm being in Rogue's corner. And the reason why I'm saying that, because you have some folks out there who say like, oh, Rogue and also like Wolverine are like the adoptive parents to Rogue. And for me personally, that's not the case at all. For me, Storm and Wolverine are kind of like the big siblings to Rogue. Either way, for Storm, the reason why she's here now because she heard Rogue scream in her sleep, but also the idea that Rogue had overslept. Now, for Storm being there, it's also her being in Rogue's corner, being like, hey, what's going on with you? This is why I say it's like post-trial of Gambit. Because for Rogue, when her powers were shut down in the trial of the Gambit storyline, it allowed her the ability to actually get close to Gambit, build a bond with Gambit. And with that bond right there, are being strong with the idea that both characters had feelings for one another, they got even closer than they were earlier in their love life. Now, on top of that, for Rogue, for many years, she was not really able to touch other people. And so getting that chance to touch Gambit, the man she truly loves, it kind of gave her this rebirth where she was then able to, build a close bond with him. But it's also the idea she's wondering why in the world is she having these dreams for? Now for Storm, she does remind us that when it comes to Rogue, when she does touch other people, she does absorb their powers and yes, their memories as well, but also their psyches as well too. So for example, there was a storyline for Rogue where the persona of Captain Marvel kind of took over the body of Rogue for a good moment there. It was like battling for the body of Rogue, Captain Marvel or Rogue herself. And so for Storm, she's kind of wondering, is part of Gambit right now inside of her? If that's the case, maybe a part of him is the reason why she's having those dreams. Now, another couple we have to focus on is going to be, well, Archangel and also Psylocke. Now, for me personally, for these two characters, they were another power couple for the X-Men. The only thing is that by the end of the 1990s or really early 2000s, they kind of fell apart for a lot of different reasons. But you also had Marvel try their best over the years to kind of bring these two characters back together. But either way, when it comes to Psylocke, she's going through the whole idea of the Crimson Dawn. And for Archangel, it's him trying to help out Psylocke the best he can. And that right there is the problem, because for Psylocke, being connected to the Crimson Dawn is kind of changing her mind on how she looks at life. Because for Psylocke, it's the idea that she does not look at life as a complex thing like most people do, with the idea of so many choices that go on their days throughout their lives. But for Psylocke, it's her saying like life is easy once you kind of remove all these different complex things and just make the right choices. But also the fact that like once you make that choice, ride that choice. Don't try to go back and forth between different choices when it comes to your life. And the reason why she's saying that, because for Archangel, it's him right now kind of deciding what to do. Like, should he be a full-on X-Men or kind of be away from the X-Men to be able to spend time with her, but also kind of help her deal with the idea of the Crimson Dawn? But for Archangel, he kind of hates the idea of what Psylocke is saying, because for Psylocke, it's her saying like, dude, just choose something and just move on. But also the idea that you had Psylocke jump off a building. And the reason why, because she wanted to show him like, look, you knew what to do just like that when it came to saving my life. You didn't sit there and wonder like if you should or not, you just did it. So when it comes to your other choices, why not do the same thing as well? Now, for the X-Men, they're right now trying to have a relaxing day, because for their roster, it has gone through a lot in a very short period of time when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. You have Cyclops and Jean Grey, who had officially left the X-Men, and we'll kind of explain that here in a moment. But you have Charles Xavier, who got arrested for the whole idea of the Onslaught event. You have Gambit gone because of what he did, the Mutant Massacre. Archangel and Psylocke are also away as well. Like, there are a lot of different pieces missing from the X-Men, but you also had the X-Men bring in 3 new characters: Dr. Reyes, Maggot, and also Marrow. Now, while you do have the X-Men getting ready for a fun day outside, you didn't have Logan realize that they have company. And that would be Margaret Stone. Now, for Margaret Stone, she's part of the Board of Education. Here's the thing, because for her being there, her main goal is to figure out what's going on here at the school that Charles claimed to be a school. Because for Charles, he was supposed to send reports every 2 years to the Board of Education. He has not done that. Now, we can say the reason why, because what the X-Men had gone through in the 1990s, all these different X-Men crossovers. But her main goal at the moment is to see if the school should be re-accredited at all. And so she has to walk around the school. And of course, with Logan, this is the worst time to actually do that. Now, there is another plot line we kind of have to talk about. It's kind of like plot line C. It's the idea of Bishop and Deathbird, because when it came to the X-Men, they were in space helping out the Shi'ar Empire. On their way back to Earth, their ship had crashed. Now, for most of the X-Men, they had made it back to Earth. Bishop did not. Out of nowhere, him and Deathbird were teleported away. Now, for Bishop, he was badly injured. And so for Deathbird, her main goal right now is to help him recover. But in that storyline that we had covered, for Bishop and also Deathbird, they got really close. And for Deathbird, she wants to keep him around to kind of help him rule over the Empire. Now, with all that being said, for Deathbird, she had told Bishop the rest of the X-Men had died. Now, for Bishop, he does not believe her, but at the same time, he can't do anything because she says that he's paralyzed, but she's right now trying to help him recover. Now, we do see Rogue go over to where Joseph is at. Now, for Joseph, he is technically Magneto, but right now at this time, we don't know if he truly is, because in an earlier storyline, we had talked about the idea of another Magneto, possibly the original Magneto, reappearing in the world of Marvel Comics. Now, with all that being said, for Joseph, he's currently staying with the X-Men at the moment. And for him and Rogue, they kind of got close there for a moment as well. But you do have Rogue go out of her way to confront him and ask him to touch him, to look into his mind. Now, for Rogue, she claims it's the way to help Joseph truly remember who he is, because for Joseph, he does not really remember anything from his past when it comes to him being Magneto. But for Joseph, he kind of realized that what Rogue is asking is not really to help him, but to really help her. And so he says no. Now, for Rogue, she does walk away. And you have Logan and also Margaret walk into the room. Well, while they're doing that, something happens to Joseph where he just kneels over. And for Margaret, she's kind of like, what in the world is going on here at the school? But either way, you didn't have the X-Men just go ahead and go over to the pond to be able to, just relax. Now, things kind of go south very quickly because you do have Bobby Drake go out of his way to prank Logan. And for Logan, he hates the idea of, well, being pranked by Bobby Drake. And so you have Logan try to attack Bobby after being pranked by him. Now, for Storm, she does step in, and so does Marrow. And really, when it comes to Storm and Marrow, they judge Logan a lot, where it does tick him off and make him walk away. Now, we could technically say that all that happened because for Wolverine around this time in Marvel Comics, it was the whole idea that when Magneto had removed the adamantium off his bones, Charles Xavier had discovered that apparently the adamantium had started a process that was going on with Wolverine. And let me explain. So ever since Wolverine Mutant Psi had activated, he was supposed to go through some kind of process where he would turn into a wild beast. Not literally, but his mindset would be like that. The adamantium on his bones kind of stopped that process. And so once you have Magneto being able to remove the adamantium, that process had kind of continued. Now, for Elektra and also Stick, they were kind of able to teach Wolverine to not allow his wild side to take over. But again, we could say what that would happen right now for this moment, but it's not confirmed. But he does walk away. Now, after he does walk away, you didn't have the X-Men realize the original Blackbird that Forge made is underneath the pond. It's buried deep in the pond because, well, Forge was told to hide it somewhere while he was making a new one. But that now shifts us over to, well, good old Wolverine again. And for Wolverine, he's just resting by himself. But then out of nowhere, something or someone grabs him and absorbs his energy. Now, he does scream out loud. And the rest of the X-Men, they run over to his location. When they arrive, we're kind of left to believe it had to be Rogue. Because when they do arrive, they find Rogue there. And of course, it's kind of like, Rogue, what did you do to Logan? Now, for her, she's saying she's innocent. And the reason why, because she arrived there only because she heard the screams of Wolverine. Now, for Storm, it's kind of like she trusts Rogue, but she has to be sure. But for Rogue, it's like, no, you don't trust me. And she runs away. Now, right after that, you didn't have the X-Men be confronted by Sauron. Now, for Sauron, again, this is a character we have not talked about in a good while when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. The whole origin of Carl Lycos is somewhat important for the overall story when it comes to the idea of Sauron. Now, for Carl Lycos, who is Sauron, Carl Lycos used to work alongside with Charles Xavier back in the day on a special project. The problem is that when it came to Marvel Comics, they had never truly explained what that project was all about. But anyways, for Carl Lycos, in that same storyline, we had learned that he was bitten by a mutated pterodactyl, where unfortunately, it turned into this vampire-like character where he has to absorb the life energy of other people. Here comes the big catch though, because when he does go out of his way to absorb the energy of a mutant, he does change into his Sauron form. Here's another catch though. When he does change form into Sauron, it's basically kind of like the Hulk, a whole brand new persona that is just completely evil though. And so right now for him to stay in that form, he has to go out of his way to absorb the energy of a mutant like he did when it came to, well, Wolverine. And so once he does, he also gains extra strength and speed as well. Now, for Sauron, he had technically left the Savage Land behind for a lot of different reasons. The one reason being Khazar, but also the idea of the Savage Land around his time in Marvel Comics being wiped out. Not yet, but like it was the idea of the possibility it could be wiped out. Anyways, when he arrived in New York, of course he needed someone to feed off of to survive. Now, at first, he did absorb the energy of a regular human, but then he found a mutant. Once he was able to absorb the energy of that random mutant, it kind of gave him the ability to take full-on control as Sauron again, or the other persona known as Carl Lycos. And so with the Sauron persona being in full control, you then had Sauron go out of his way to find the X-Men. He had picked up on their scent. And so that is why right now, he's currently here trying to fight against our heroes at the moment. Now, for a brief moment, I do want to shift back over to Deathbird and also, well, Bishop, because for those two characters, like we saw earlier, they're still traveling through space at the moment, but it's also Bishop beginning to realize even more now that he's being played by Deathbird about the idea of what happened to the X-Men, but also why she only saved him, but not the rest of the X-Men when they were attacked in the earlier storyline. Now, for Deathbird and Bishop, as they're traveling through space, out of nowhere, their spaceship begins to get attacked by another spaceship. And so for Deathbird and also Bishop, it does seem like their spaceship is about to crash onto a random planet. Now, as we do shift back over to Rogue, we see Rogue go back over to Joseph, where she finds him completely knocked out, needing CPR. Now, for Rogue, she does go out of her way to give him CPR, but then Marrow appeared to remind us that Marrow is technically part of the X-Men at this point. But anyways, when it comes to Marrow, she does see what Rogue is doing at the moment, which is right now trying to give CPR to Joseph. But for Rogue, she begins to freak out and think that Marrow thinks that she's right now trying to do something to Magneto, Joseph. Now, for Marrow, she clarifies saying, no, I saw you trying to do right there. It's all good. Now, once you have Joseph get back up, Rogue just dips out. And Accordion was wondering, where is she going to? Now, I kind of want to go ahead and shift back over to the battle between the X-Men and also Sauron, because for me personally, it does get a tad bit funny. I don't know why. It's the whole idea of him just being able to pull out a gun to surprise our heroes, because our heroes are all like, we got all these different powers. You know, you really can't stop us. We got you on the edge. He's all like, oh, do you now? I got a gun. Bam, bam. And like shoot Storm. And I'm like, wait, hold up. Why in the world does this man just have a random gun to use in this battle? But either way, as the pages go on, we do see the X-Men officially lose the battle. Really, you have Jubilee in the last one try to make a stand against him, but unfortunately, she also falls to him as well. Now, I do want to take a quick pause on the battle between the X-Men and also Sauron, and the reason why, because I want to shift over to Cyclops and Jean Grey, because like I said earlier, for those two characters, they had officially left the X-Men, right? They had moved away from the X-Men to allow Cyclops to recover. And the reason why, because back in Operation Zero Tolerance, we had learned that Bastion had put a bomb inside the body of Cyclops, where of course he had to recover thanks to Dr. Reyes being able to remove the bomb from his body. And so while you do have the two characters at the moment away from the X-Men in Alaska, well, you have Cyclops being very upset about the idea that he's no longer able to control his powers like he used to in the past when it came to like just pinpointing his blast at different targets. And the reason why he can't do that anymore is because the pain he's currently feeling at the moment. Now, with all that being said, you didn't have Jean Grey walk out the room. When she does, we see Jean Grey wearing the Phoenix outfit. And for Cyclops, he's wondering what in the world is going on here. But this kind of leads us into the ending of the storyline. The reason why, because we do go at Wolverine being able to regain enough strength to fight against Sauron. Now, as the battle goes on, you then have Jubilee being able to come in at the very last second to help out Logan to fight against him, where of course you do have the two characters being able to take him down. Now, after doing that, you then have the X-Men say, okay, what do we do with him? Now, for Logan, he's kind of like, listen, we'll call in S.H.I.E.L.D. to take him away. But his main goal right now is to figure out what's going on with Rogue. Because we do learn earlier on that when it came to Sauron draining the energy of Wolverine, well, technically, right after that, you did have Rogue appear, and she also absorbed a tad bit of powers as well of Wolverine, and then just dipped out. And so for Logan, he wants to know what's going on with her. But for Rogue, she had officially left and started traveling over to Manhattan. Okay, so I had technically goofed when it came to our coverage over the X-Men. And the thing is, guys, like every once in a while, when it comes to my coverage over the X-Men, I like miss a certain book. We are covering like almost every single X title that was released over time by Marvel Comics. So X-Force, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, X-Factor, and the list goes on and on. Now, technically, our coverage kind of got a little bit easier because some of the late 1990 books have not been re-released by Marvel Comics yet. So once you have Marvel do those re-release, I'm gonna go ahead and cover those books we didn't cover. But either way, occasionally I might miss like one or two, and sometimes three stories as we work through our coverage over the X-Men. Like for example, I forgot to cover X-Men issue number 72. Now, this issue is nothing really important, but I kind of feel like there's somebody out there who might ask me like, hey, Fresh, where can I find that video for X-Men issue number 72? Well, here it is. It's the whole idea of Wolverine going up against Marrow. Now, I kind of want to sit down and talk about the idea of why Storm is hated by Marrow so much, because this is a callback to so many different stories that we have covered when it comes to the X-Men. So, when it came to Storm a long time ago, she had defeated Callisto. Now, once she had did that, Storm had gained the right to be the leader of the Morlocks. But for Storm, she was going to be with the X-Men. So she told Callisto, "You're still in charge when I'm not here." Now, when it came to the Morlocks, as we all know, they went through a lot. The idea of the Mutant Massacre, the idea of Colossus' brother, like the Morlocks have gone through a lot. But when it comes to Colossus' brother, he kind of plays a very important role when it comes to the character of Marrow. And the reason why I'm saying that, because when it came to Colossus' brother, what he did was, Mikhail, he flooded all the tunnels of the Morlocks. And so we were kind of left to believe that the Morlocks were dead. But in reality, what he did was he teleported himself and the Morlocks into another dimension, just out there in a different dimension where time moved differently. And so the young Morlocks like Marrow, they grew up at a faster rate. And so when they came back over to Earth, they had a mission. That mission was to go after the human race. And they called themselves the Gene Nation. Now, the reason why they were going after the human race, because for the second generation of Morlocks like Marrow, they believe it's the humans' fault for why they lived in the tunnels of New York. And so because of that, they were kind of like, hey, you know what? It's their fault. Let's go ahead and kill off the humans. Now, you had the X-Men get involved, and you also had Storm being able to stop Marrow from killing off these innocent humans who were just minding their business, got grabbed to be killed off for some kind of unknown war between the humans and the Morlocks. Now, after that, you had a storyline called Operation Zero Tolerance, and you had Callisto and also Marrow kind of get involved in that storyline. Callisto got seriously injured. When it came to Callisto, she asked Marrow to not go down this dark path that she was currently on, like change your life, turn your life around. And so for Marrow, she had joined the X-Men. Now, this all leads into why I say Marrow does not like Storm, because for Marrow, it's her kind of like Storm. You were not there for us as a leader. Like you abandoned us. You're with the X-Men out there living a good life and having a good old time, while your people you're supposed to lead, the Morlocks, were suffering. And so even though Storm defeated Marrow a long time ago to show that she's still a better fighter, a better leader, it's still the idea for Marrow is kind of like you failed us as a leader. But as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, it's really more of us seeing Wolverine telling Marrow to just basically move on with the idea of her hatred for Storm, because now with Marrow being part of the X-Men, that also means like she has to follow certain rules if she's going to stay with the X-Men. But it's also Wolverine saying like, let me go ahead and try to teach you. Now, when it comes to Wolverine, with him now kind of being that second in charge of the X-Men, because Cyclops and Jean Grey had officially left the X-Men, which now means Storm's first in charge, but Wolverine is also there as well. For Logan, he wants to make sure the kids fall in line. But for Wolverine, he was told by Cyclops to kind of Be nice to the kids. But for Logan, he knows for Marrow, you can't be nice to her to get her on the right path that she needs to be on with the X-Men. You gotta be that tough person. And so for Logan, he's like, listen, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to be your drill sergeant. I'm here to make sure that you are actually ready to help out the X-Men. Now, we do have to shift our focus over to Gabrielle Haller. Now, for Gabrielle Haller, she is the ex-lover to Charles Xavier. And I kind of hate saying that for a character, but like, that's what she is, because technically she is the mother to his child, better known as Legion. Now, she's an ambassador for Israel, but her main goal at the moment is to write a letter over to Senator Kelly. And the reason why, because in the middle of Operation Zero Tolerance, I almost said Operation Overdrive. For some reason, the Power Rangers came in my head right there. But anyways, when it comes to Operation Zero Tolerance, you had Senator Kelly in the middle of that event realize that allowing Bastion to go after innocent mutants on American soil was completely wrong. Like, those mutants did nothing wrong, so why in the world should they be attacked by Bastion and his prime sentinels? And so it's Gabrielle saying, you did the right thing stepping in and bringing down Bastion, but what about Charles Xavier? Because for Charles Xavier, that dude has been arrested ever since the idea of, well, Onslaught. Now, with all that being said, while she's writing that letter, she is confronted by somebody else. But before we're able to figure out like who's there want to talk to Gabrielle, we have to shift our focus over to Cannonball. Now, for Cannonball and the rest of the X-Men, they're still trying to rebuild the school for so many different attacks that has happened over the years. But when it comes to Cannonball, he kind of feels like it should be him to like be able to build that bond with Marrow. But Storm tells him no. Now, for Storm, it's her thinking that she's being the leader by telling him like stay away from Marrow. Like, yes, she's an X-Men right now, but she is a terrorist. She was trying to kill off humans. She's a bad person. But that kind of continues the idea of Storm and Marrow having bad blood for one another. But also at the same time, though, it's kind of like Storm, you still look at Marrow as this person going down the wrong path, but you're not trying to help her get on the right path. And so here's Cannonball trying to help out Marrow, but Storm's being that big sister, not really being the leader, and telling him all like, you can't go down there. She's a terrorist. Go away right now. And for Cannonball, he dips out angry because it's the idea of Storm treating him like he's a child. But with all that commotion going on, we also get reminded that there are two other people who had recently joined the X-Men. That would be Dr. Reyes and also the idea of Maggot. Now, for Dr. Reyes, we kind of know the actual background of this character. But when it comes to Maggot, we're still kind of learning more about him and his actual origin story, which becomes somewhat important with his connection to, well, Joseph. But I kind of want to go ahead and shift back over to Wolverine and also Marrow. Here's the reason why. Because for Wolverine, it's him wanting to show Marrow that she's completely wrong when it comes to her idea of the Morlocks. Because for Marrow, Wolverine realized that she's feeding off anger. She's feeding off getting revenge against the human race for what they had supposedly done to the Morlocks. But for Wolverine, he's saying, okay, you have all that rage, all that hatred for humans, but like, you're not acting like a Morlock. And that's really important right there. It's him saying, like, I know the Morlocks. I fought against the Morlocks. For me personally, the Morlocks were just people who had standards. They were not terrorists. They weren't going after humans for some unknown war. Like for the humans, they may hate how the Morlocks look, but the humans were not bothering you guys, except here you come attacking innocent humans who had no idea that they had beef with you. That right there is a problem. Morlocks have standards. Now, as we shift back over to Gabrielle, we do learn that she is confronted by Sabra. Now, for Sabra, she's part of the Israel's Secret Service. Now, here's the thing, because she's here meeting go with Gabrielle to inform Gabrielle that she had just learned that Magneto's real name is not Eric at all. That right there is a huge, big shocking moment, because it's now the idea that the real name of Magneto is not Eric. what could it possibly be? Because what Sabre is saying right now is that there was somebody out there who forged different documents to allow the world to believe that, yes, Magneto's real name is Eric. But in reality, it's not Eric, it's something else. Now, for Gabrielle, she's kind of like, okay, cool. We got to find this guy because this guy is the only thing we have that could basically give us the true identity of Magneto. And so you have Sabre and her both dip out to find this guy who forged all the false documents. And so while you do have the two ladies trying their best to get over to that guy who basically helped out Magneto by giving him false documents to hide his true name, well, we see him now being confronted by Magneto because Magneto now knows that there's a possibility that his real name might officially get out there. And so this kind of leads into us going back over to Wolverine fighting against Marrow. Now, while you do have the two characters fighting against one another, it's now Marrow trying to make her point that even though like Cyclops told Logan to make sure you go easy on the kids, and also the fact that she may be fighting out of rage or this hunger for revenge and whatever, it's really her saying like, I don't need your help. Like, I'm freaking Marrow. I'm a great fighter. Forget you, bro. First and second chance. I don't need those. And so you have Marrow being able to stab Logan right in the throat. Now, when it comes to Logan, around this time, we have learned that when he had gained his mutant abilities, he was supposed to slowly turn into this feral beast. What happened was adamantium being bonded on his bones had stopped that process. But when it came to fatal attractions, when you have Magneto rip off the adamantium, that process was then able to continue again. Now, thankfully for Logan, he had Elektra and he also had Stick there to kind of make sure he stays on the right path and not turn into that feral beast. Here comes the problem, though, because with him being stabbed in the throat by Marrow, it's now him going feral. But getting back over to Magneto, we kind of learn like the actual backstory when it comes to Magneto meeting this guy who was helping him keep his fake name from being known by the public. Because we do learn here that for Magneto, he met this guy shortly after the death of his daughter. Because remember, for Magneto, he had a child with Magda before the Scarlet Witch, before Quicksilver and Polaris. The problem was his first child was killed off because the city folks were mad at Magneto. They were trying to burn down his home. And unfortunately, she died. And so for Magneto, he kind of left that city behind, but he used this guy as a way to begin a new life for himself out there in the world, but also kind of give him the ability to look for Magda. Anyways, though, when it comes to Magneto, he was promised that no one will find out that his name is not Eric. And so he felt like he was lied to, but also he has to cut ties with anybody that could possibly lead them over to finding out his true past. And so the guy dies right there. But you then had this chapter begin to wind down because while you do have the rest of the X-Men arrive just in time to bring down Logan to hopefully stop him from killing off Marrow, you have Marrow disappear into the tunnels of the Morlocks where she does regroup with Callisto. And really, it was Callisto who asked Marrow to join the X-Men to go down the right path. Now, for Cannonball, though, he's very upset because of Storm. She's not really trying to give Marrow a second chance when it comes to the idea of the possibility of her being an X-Man. The last few pages of this issue is also reminding us what happened at the end of an earlier storyline, because for Maggot, he has these two bug creatures who just really hang out with him, but they had disappeared at the end of one of our earlier storylines and they fed off a homeless person's body. And so that body has now been officially found by the people of Salem Center. And so while they found a dead body, they realized there's a blood trail that's leading over to the school of Charles Xavier. But now we're able to transition over to Uncanny X-Men issue number 355. Now, this was kind of picking up where our last X-Men video had left off at. The idea that you had the X-Men fight against Sauron. Now, when it came to that battle, you had the X-Men being able to defeat him, but you also had Wolverine say that he'll take Sauron into the city and hopefully pass him off to S.H.I.E.L.D. or somebody else that could hold on to him. The problem is that while you have Wolverine trying his best to make it over to the city, well, that is when you have Wolverine be confronted by Alpha Flight. Now, this is really important. And the reason why, because Alpha Flight was sent here to get Wolverine. Now, in the late 1990s, you had Marvel cancel the original run for Alpha Flight, but then gave us a whole brand new book, hoping to bring fans back into the actual book. But either way, for Alpha Flight, they said they're here for Logan, to arrest him. Now, before we're able to learn more about why in the world Alpha Flight is trying to arrest Wolverine, we switch over to Rogue. Now, for Rogue, it's her right now trying to hopefully find a cure for her mutant powers, to kind of get rid of them. Because we do see her visiting a doctor who is supposedly this great doctor who knows how to get rid of mutant genetics within somebody's body to basically cure them, to turn them into humans. But of course, each mutant is special, so he needs time to sit down and study each mutant that he's trying to help out. Like for Rogue, he does get a few DNA samples and he needs some time to figure out how he'll be able to cure her. But either way, you do have Rogue leave. Now, getting back over to Wolverine and meeting Alpha Flight, for Wolverine, he really does try to ignore them because to him, he can't believe that Alpha Flight came all the way over to New York into the United States because for Alpha Flight, they are the Canadian superhero team. But the thing is, for Wolverine, he was part of Department H, which of course right now also runs Alpha Flight. And so every once in a while, you have Department H believe that they can just grab Wolverine whenever they want to, but literally almost every single time they don't get what they want when it comes to Logan. But either way, when it comes to Alpha Flight, they're not really telling us like why they're here for, just to arrest him, and that's really it. Now for Wolverine, he goes on with his day like, okay, cool. Nice to see you guys. That's kind of funny that y'all believe that y'all have the right to arrest me. It's also pretty wild that you have two new people on your team and they believe they can take me down. Now, I do want to switch over to Cyclops and Jean Grey because these two characters, they had officially left the X-Men. And the reason why, because in the middle of Operation Zero Tolerance, we had learned that Bastion had planted a bomb inside of Cyclops. Now, thanks to Dr. Reyes, she was then able to remove the bomb. Here's the problem though, because for Cyclops and Jean Grey, they had officially left the X-Men to allow him to recover, but have some alone time. But now as Jean Grey is trying to claim the whole idea of the Phoenix. Now, the whole idea of the Phoenix is very complicated. And the reason why I'm saying that, because for the Dark Phoenix saga, we were left to believe at first that it was Jean Grey who was the Phoenix who had quote unquote died in that storyline. But then later on, we got a retcon saying that actually, no, that was never the Jean Grey, not the Jean Grey. That was never Jean Grey. That was the Phoenix who was pretending to be Jean Grey. The real Jean Grey was being kept at the bottom of the bay. And so for Cyclops, he believed that his lover, Jean Grey, had died that day in the Dark Phoenix saga. Then he met Madeline Pryor and only find out that Madeline Pryor is, well, the clone of Jean Grey. And so for Jean Grey, right now in the present day, is her saying that she's trying to claim everything that was kind of taken away from her. The whole idea that you had two other personas out there in the world that had her face, that had her voice, that were trying to live her life. And the problem was that she had no choice in the idea of allowing the Phoenix or Madeline Pryor to take those things from her. And so it's her saying, I'm going to claim everything about me, Jean Grey, the Phoenix, and even Madeline Pryor. But now the rest of this video is going to be Wolverine fighting against Alpha Flight. Now, you do have the rest of the X-Men arrive as well in the middle of the battle, including Rogue, to help out Wolverine. But we do learn here, like, why is Alpha Flight trying to arrest Wolverine? Why they're trying to bring him in? Okay, so the whole idea why they're here is because they saw a videotape where you had Wolverine quote unquote kill somebody. The problem is that you can tell right off the bat that's not true at all. But also the idea that when they give the date over when it happened to Cannonball, Cannonball says there's no way that was Wolverine. And the reason why, because the X-Men were deep in the Operation Zero Tolerance event, which means Wolverine was locked up in Bastion's base while supposedly this crime was committed over in Canada. And so once you have the X-Men and also Alpha Flight realize that they have been tricked, that they have been played, they leave. Here's the thing though, because it was Cannonball, the youngest member of the X-Men, say, hey guys, stop fighting and let's try to work things out by using words without our fists. And of course, he was able to realize that Logan was innocent. So yeah, that is literally the end of this book. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And we're going to pick up with X-Men issue number 73, 74, and 75. So 3 parts we're going to cover here for today's video. Now, with that being said, picking up with X-Men issue number 73, we're really picking up with Joseph. Now remember, for Joseph, he is this other Magneto, because by this point we have seen 2 Magnetos, but for Joseph, it's him right now trying to figure out like his past still, trying to figure out who he is. Now, you have Joseph currently in the room of Rogue, because around this time in Marvel Comics, you really had like Rogue and this love triangle between Joseph, her, and Gambit, but at the same time, there was like, she really did care more for Gambit rather than, well, Joseph. Either way, she does kick him out of the room because she's trying her best to sleep in for the moment. Now we do shift over to some of the other X-Men who are still kind of working on rebuilding the school of Charles Xavier that was badly damaged in earlier events. But while you have the X-Men trying to repair the actual building, you did have Beast arrive with a letter from Charles Xavier. Now remember, when it came to Charles Xavier, he was technically arrested for the whole idea of Onslaught. Now, when he was arrested, it wasn't really told to the authorities or like he was Onslaught or like what his actual crimes were. Now, when it came to Bastion, he had Charles Xavier locked up, but then out of nowhere, Charles had disappeared. This will lead into the hunt for Xavier. But either way, for the X-Men at the moment, they received this letter where it's Charles Xavier right now kind of saying like, Happy New Year's, I'm okay, I missed you guys. We already know that's not the truth at all. And really, when it comes to Wolverine, kind of hints at the idea that there's something off about the letter. And really, for the X-Men, they're not the only ones kind of wondering about, Charles Xavier. It's the same thing for Senator Kelly, who had recently had a change of heart when it came to the idea of mutants. Matter of fact, he was one of the few people who went out of their way to make sure that Bastion was no longer able to attack the Americans who are mutants because he wanted to kill off the entire mutant race. But it's also him trying his best to kind of look for Charles Xavier. Now, but also going on, you have Sebastian Shaw kind of wondering what should be his next move. Matter of fact, later on in this chapter right here, we're going to talk more about that. But something else I do want to point out is the whole idea of, well, Maggot. Because for Maggot, his origin is still kind of like a mystery to us by this point in our coverage over the X-Men. But it's also the idea that for Maggot, he called Joseph his friend because he believes that Joseph is Magneto. And so ever since then for Joseph, he's kind of like, hey, you know what? I'm trying my best to remember my past, but unfortunately I can't. But I feel like you might have the key to help me remember my past. But also I want to know, like, how are we truthfully friends? And so you have Joseph really sit down and tell Maggot, like, we got to talk. So let's go outside right now to have a one-on-one private conversation. Now, while you have the X-Men kind of dealing with their own things, we switch over to Salem Center. That's the city where the school of Charles Xavier is actually placed at. But in the actual town, you have some detectives at the moment right now trying to figure out who's going around killing off people left and right, because some dead bodies are now popping up out of nowhere. And usually this is a quiet town. But right now the dead bodies kind of point at the idea that it's somebody currently at the school of Charles Xavier. And really, speaking of the school of Charles Xavier, when we do switch over to it, we pick up with Dr. Reyes. Now, Dr. Reyes, one of the new members of the X-Men, alongside with Maggot and also Marrow. Speaking of Marrow, in our last video, she had stabbed Wolverine, right? And went into the tunnels of the Morlocks. Now, when she did that, she went to go check in on Callisto, who was badly injured in an earlier storyline. Now, when it comes to Marrow, what she did was she went back over to school of Charles Xavier, broke into Dr. Reyes' room, took her medical kit, and dipped the heck out of there. Now, for Dr. Reyes, she saw Callisto trying to get away and tried her best to chase after her. Beast got in the way. Now, for Beast, he also realized that for Dr. Reyes, her powers have begun to evolve, where she's no longer trying to use her powers in a more defensive type of way, but more now as a type of offense against her enemies, possibly down the road. Now, it's also Beast introducing the idea of New Year goals, because this chapter right here does take place around New Year's Day. And so it's Beast right now kind of showing off this piece of paper that he taped on the wall, hoping that the different members of the X-Men go out of their way to write down their goals for the entire school of Charles Xavier. But I want to go ahead and shift over to Sebastian Shaw. Here's the reason why. Because for Sebastian, man, this dude came back out of nowhere in the mid-1990s and was really trying to bring back the Hellfire Club he had, not the one his son was trying to build up. Now, for Sebastian, we saw in the X-Men videos that he really did try his best to bring in different people to his side. The problem was that it's taking forever to regrow the inner circle. As a matter of fact, at this Hellfire Club party, we see different characters there. We see Tony Stark, we see Angel, Psylocke, we even see Norman Osborn. Matter of fact, for Norman, he makes fun of Sebastian Shaw trying to reach the goal of, the Hellfire Club controlling the entire world. Either way, for Sebastian, the earlier storyline, he had received this symbol from Apocalypse. This will lead into a future storyline I'm going to cover as well. But it's also Sebastian kind of wondering, what should he do? Should he give up on the idea of the inner circle of the Hellfire Club, or try to continue that, all at the same time work with Apocalypse possibly? Now, back at the school of Charles Xavier, we do see that for Magneto, Joseph, and also Maggot, they begin to try to have this conversation with one another. This is where you really have Joseph begin to realize that he's not Magneto, that possibly he's something else entirely, maybe just a clone. But either way, while you do have the two guys begin to have their conversation, out of nowhere, you then have Magneto be attacked by a character we've been seeing for a good while now. And that would be, of course, Sabra. Now, for Sabra, she's here for an actual good purpose. But before we're able to kind of dig into that purpose, I want to switch over to Storm and Wolverine. Here's the reason why. Because for these two characters, well, they're kind of like best friends. But for me, over time in the X-Men comics, I feel like 1990s especially, when it came to Storm and Logan, you begin to see the two characters kind of look at each other more than friends. Like for Logan, he will always have Storm back, and the same goes for her when it comes to Logan. But at the same time, kind of get the idea there's something more between them. But either way, it's Logan saying listen, what happened to Marrow was a complete, not accident, but he meant to do it technically. And what I mean by that is, in an earlier video, you had Wolverine wanting to set Marrow in place, because for Storm and Marrow, there's a lot of bad blood between those two characters. And so for Logan, he kind of went in his way to have this conversation with Marrow, listen, I don't care about your bad blood with Storm. You're part of the X-Men. So you now have to work with us as a team. But while you had those two characters talking, back at the post office in Salem Center, the city, you had the guy realize a package has arrived at the post office for Storm. Now, unfortunately, there's not enough stamps on it to make it over to Storm. So to him, it's kind of like, you know what? Return back to Cinder. But then out of nowhere, all these different guys just pop in and say, that package better get delivered to Storm. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and switch over to Sabra. Here is the reason why. Because for Sabra, she works for like the Secret Service, but in Israel. But the thing was, she had discovered that there was this guy out there who went out of his way to make a fake name for Magneto. The problem is that when she found that guy, he was killed off, and most likely done by Magneto. Now, we already know it was done by Magneto, but not this Magneto. Because of her, she believes that Joseph is Magneto, and he has to pay for his crimes. But that's when you have Maggot say, stop. That's not Magneto at all. And of course, meaning that we're now beginning the process of learning who is Joseph. Except now we have to switch over to Senator Kelly. And the reason why, because he believes that he has found Charles Xavier, that he will finally free Charles Xavier. The problem is that he goes to this cell where he believes that Charles being held at. Charles is not there. So the question is now, where is Charles Xavier? And then you also have Sebastian Shaw saying, you know what? It's time for me to make a path. Like choose my goal, choose my future. And so you have Sebastian go out of his way to begin the process of burning the symbol or the paper that was given to him by Apocalypse. And for Apocalypse, he's kind of like, perfect. You chose correctly. So again, this is moving towards a future storyline. Now we do get to the end of this chapter. We do see Maggot explain Joseph is not Magneto. Now, he's not really giving us a full idea of why he is saying that, or really more of what does he truly mean behind it. Because for Maggot, what he tells us is that, no, Joseph, when I first met you, I thought you were Magneto. But then as we talk to one another, I realize you're not Magneto. And I really can't tell you anything else, but just know that you are not Magneto. Now, for Joseph, it really does feel like he is Magneto. But it's also Sabra saying listen. Sabra. It's Sabra saying listen, why not come with me and you and I can work together to discover your actual past, your actual origin, to figure out if you are Magneto or not. And so he agrees. And so for Joseph, it's him officially leaving the X-Men to hopefully figure out what is his actual origin. Is he Magneto or not? But as we dive into issue number 74, we do pick back up with Marrow again. Now for Marrow, it's really more of her just trying her best to save the life of Callisto, who was again badly injured back in Operation Zero Tolerance. But no matter what Marrow does, nothing is truthfully working when it comes to saving her life. And really for Marrow, she's kind of hoping that magic will work as a way to save Callisto. But for Callisto, she's kind of listen, I'm going to die. So why not go ahead and just rejoin the X-Men? But now we have to transition over to, Archangel. Now, for Warren, man, he has gone through a lot, but it's really him going back over to the Morlock tunnels. And the reason why, because this is a massive callback to the Mutant Massacre. Really, everything is a callback to the Mutant Massacre when it comes to the 1990s content. But anyways, for Archangel, he was badly injured in the Mutant Massacre to the point where Cameron Hodge, who he had believed to be his friend, had his wings removed. And of course, that led to him meeting Apocalypse, turning into Archangel, a bad guy for a brief moment, and then join X-Factor, now part of the X-Men. But the whole idea that the Morlock tunnels is where that journey had truly began. So it's him returning back to where it all has started for him. But you also have Wolverine going out of his way to begin to investigate what's going on in Salem Center. The whole idea of dead bodies just popping up left and right out of nowhere. And we already know that technically the dead bodies are connected to the bugs that are with Maggot, because you do have Maggot realize that he's no longer truthfully able to control the bugs that are part of his power set. And so while you do have Beast, Dr. Ray as him kind of enjoying the good old snow day, it's also Maggot saying like, okay, listen, I need to get my powers under control, because right now these bugs are no longer trying to listen to me, follow my directions. They're now going out of their way to cause problems for me and most likely other people. Now, also around this time in Marvel Comics, when it came to the Morlock tunnels, you didn't just have the Morlocks living down there. You also had, well, Abomination as well. And as we all know, Abomination is usually more of a Hulk villain. But around this time in Marvel Comics, he was also he was living in the sewers. He was kind of making his own version of the Morlocks. The idea that a bunch of misfits who were humans and also mutants who were removed from the surface society. And so he has been living down there for a good while. And so for Abomination, well, he runs into Archangel. And for him, Archangel does not really fit the whole idea of his organization, his misfit group. And so you have Abomination just begin to try to attack Archangel. But while you have Archangel trying to, well, survive, for Wolverine, he does meet Myra Armstrong. Now, for Myra Armstrong, she is the medical examiner. And so her main goal at the moment is to figure out, like, who's killing off all these different dead people. And so for Wolverine, he wants to see the dead bodies, where, of course, she can kind of show him the dead bodies that she has gathered so far. Now, we do kind of shift our focus back onto what's happening in the Morlock tunnels for the rest of this chapter for the most part, because we do see Abomination just trying to kill off Archangel. And you have Archangel just, he's really trying his best to survive here at the moment. But while you do have those two characters right now playing cat and mouse, well, we do shift over to Callisto. Because of her illness, she's not really able to see straight. And so at the moment, she believes that Colossus had came to see her. Now, we already know this is not Colossus for two reasons. One, Colossus most likely does not even know that Callisto is like seriously injured. But on top of that, for Colossus, he's with Excalibur at the moment, so there's no way that he'll be down here. We also learned it's not him, but because of her injuries, she can't see straight. So what she's seeing right now is somebody else about to inject something into her system. Now, to kind of wrap up this chapter, or really begin the process of wrapping up this chapter, while you do have Abomination try to find Archangel, you then have Marrow step in. Now, for Marrow, it's kind of cool here, like in a very strange way, because for Marrow, she's the one who has all the courage at the moment, while you have Archangel just basically being a scaredy cat. But once you have Marrow step up to Abomination, Archangel realized, like, you know what? Hey, I should step in. But it's also kind of like Archangel and Marrow helping out one another. And the reason why, because for Marrow, it's the idea that she looked at herself as a hideous being. Because for Abomination, once he finds Marrow, he wants her to join his group of misfits because the way she looks, the way she acts. But it's Archangel saying she's not ugly, she's not deformed, it's just that her beauty is there. But it's really more him saying the beauty comes from inside. And the reason why he is saying that, because for a good while in Marvel Comics, for Archangel, he kind of hated the way he looked. And the reason why, because of Apocalypse, you know, the metal wings, the whole idea of blue skin. But it's him saying, like, I looked at myself as a monster, but then I realized it's who you are on the inside that makes you what you are. So no, he's not a monster to himself, but neither is Marrow. And it's also Marrow helping him kind of refine that courage, because you do have Archangel step into, you know, fight against Abomination, where of course he does lose very easily, but it's also Marrow using her bone knives as a way to cut the eyes of Abomination. Now, at the end of all of that, you then have, you know, Archangel try to have her rejoin the X-Men, but she does disappear. But we also get the idea that thanks to Archangel, he has kind of help Marrow go on the right path again. But it's also him finding out that the Morlocks, or Marrow, was holding onto some of his old wings that were given to him by Apocalypse. But now, as we work our way into issue number 75, the last page of issue number 74, we see Wolverine trying his best to follow the clues, follow the trails of what has been going on in Salem Center. But then out of nowhere, he was also attacked from behind. So once he does wake up, he realized that most likely he was attacked by Maggot and his, well, bugs. And so, as we dive into issue number 75, the big 75th issue for the second X-Men series, you have Wolverine wake up, right? And once he does, you have Wolverine realize that his healing factor is not really working like it used to in the past. But it's also Wolverine informing Storm, informing Cannonball to go out of their way to find, well, Maggot. And the reason why, because for Wolverine, he believes that most likely Maggot is not the actual murderer. There's someone else out there who's the actual murderer. And so you have Logan leave and hoping the rest of the X-Men can find Maggot. But for Maggot, he basically dipped out because he thought he is the actual killer. He believes that his bugs, the ones he really can't fully control, had gone out of their way to kill innocent people. But he has no idea that in reality, those bugs are, well, innocent. But the cops of Salem Center, their main goal is to bring in, well, Maggot. Now, they don't know it's Maggot, but they believe their killer is out there. We also see right now for Beast and Dr. Reyes, they're really kind of arguing about the idea of who could be responsible for the deaths of all those different people. And really, it's kind of Dr. Reyes proving that Maggot is innocent, but also it's kind of like the idea for me of these two characters slowly or possibly getting together as a couple, because they do argue a lot, but in the way of like, these are two different people when it comes to science, medical, but also the idea of discovery. But either way, you have the two right now just figuring out who could be responsible for all the dead people over in Salem Center. Now, for Rogue, Storm, and also Cannonball, they're trying their best to locate Maggot, but while trying to do that, you do have Cannonball kind of act cold towards Storm. Now, for Rogue, she's kind of wondering what's up with them, but it's Storm kind of informing Rogue that earlier in this series, you had Cannonball get very upset when it came to Storm telling Cannonball how he should communicate with Marrow, saying like, hey, listen, stay away from her because she is a terrorist. She is a killer. And so it's Rose saying like, Storm, one, you don't have the right to control people, but also the fact like, two, you can't talk because you took me in and I was a terrorist in a way, but you also took in Gambit, a thief. You also took in Wolverine, his past. We still don't know everything about his past. So unfortunately, you really can't talk because, oh, here comes Marrow, this terrorist who killed somebody. And it's also Rogue saying like, I took people's memories away. Like there's folks out there who are most likely in comas or had completely forgotten their past. But as we do switch over to Wolverine, we see Wolverine find, well, the Nakari or Nakari Karen. Now, the Karen has been seen a few times in our coverage over the X-Men, especially when it came to the early days of the second X-Men team. Now, the Karen does lead into this demonic dimension where you have these demons, better known as Nakari, who would reappear over time in Marvel Comics when one of these Karens had appeared on the planet Earth. Now, the actual leader of this group of demons is a character known as Kirok, and I hope I pronounce his name correct finally. But either way, is Wolverine kind of wondering that is this the possible return of the Nakari demons, but also the return of Kirok as well. Now, you have Beast and Dr. Reyes appear as well, and you do have the three realize that they're being confronted by some wild beast. But for Rogue, Cannonball, and also Storm, they do find Maggot, where you do have the three inform Maggot like, hey, listen, your bugs are technically innocent. Like, They're not going around killing golf people. They're powerful, yes, but they're not really going after people at all and killing them. So once you have Maggot realize that technically he's innocent, but also he's allowed to rejoin the X-Men, you then have his little bug creatures try to find something, to go after something, and you have Maggot and the rest of the X-Men try to follow the bugs. The problem is that while trying to follow them, they are then quickly teleported somewhere else. But for Wolverine, Beast, and also Dr. Reyes, you have Dr. Reyes dip out. And the reason why, because her powers are not really more of playing offense, rather more playing defense. But on top of that, like, she has not been trained as an X-Men yet. So unfortunately, she can't do much yet. And so she dips out. Now, while she does dip out, you have Wolverine try his best to fight against these creatures. The problem is that these creatures, man, they are doing work on Wolverine's healing factor. Like, they are truly affecting it to the point where they're not really, or it's not really up to par as usual. And so for Logan, he knows that that means it could also affect Dr. Reyes' powers as well when it comes to her force fields. Now, for Storm, Cannonball, and also Rogue, they do learn kind of here that they have been teleported over to the Ukraine. Now, when you do have our heroes look around, you have Rogue and Storm see one of the Karens. Now, for Storm, she kind of realized this is a huge problem because usually the Karen only appears in the backyard of the X-Men home, and that's really it. But now here it is in a completely different area. So the question is now, how many of these Karens are across the world at the moment? And we do get a few pictures where we see different Karens just laying at different points across the earth, because it's Storm reminding us that these demons have been trying to invade the earth, to take over the earth. These Karens are kind of like their doorways into the earth dimension. And so if there's more than one of them, then sooner or later they could possibly see an invasion. But also the fact, like, how many demons have already crossed over without anyone truthfully knowing? Now, speaking of Maggot, he's right now in the area between dimensions. So he's kind of just chilling out right now at the moment until he's confronted by one of these new creatures. Now, luckily for Maggot, Wolverine arrives as well, which also tell us like Wolverine and also Maggot had fallen into this between area of two dimensions. Now, for Storm, Rogue, and Cannonball earlier, they kind of tried their best to locate Maggot and then kind of realized that for Maggot, he was also most likely teleported somewhere else. And so you had the three characters also be teleported into this between area, but not with the rest of the X-Men yet. Now, for Dr. Reyes and Beast, they're also in this between dimension, but we're also going to use them as a way to learn, like, what are these new creatures? I just realized I completely forgotten about Marrow in this chapter. Yeah, Marrow had reappeared when it came to Wolverine trying his best to hold off the creatures to allow Beast to save Dr. Reyes, and you had Marrow save Dr. Reyes, but unfortunately they were overpowered by the Beast and captured. Now, Wolverine, as we saw, got away, but for Beast, Dr. Reyes, and Marrow, they were captured. Now, while you do have like these creatures trying to dissect Dr. Reyes, you didn't have these creatures inform Dr. Reyes like, hey, listen, we are not Nakari or Nakari. We're not them at all. We are a whole different type of demonic creatures. And that would be the Rutai. And I really hope I pronounced their name correctly. I already know I have somebody right now in the comment section like writing down some horrible things about me. Like, how dare you mispronounce all these demonic names? Do your research. I tried, guys. I sometimes do try to find like how to pronounce some of these names. And once you watch like 15 different videos and get like 15 different pronunciations for all these different names or demonic names, you're kind of like, you know what? I give up. Anyways, though, when it comes to the Rutai, they were slaves of Nakari. And so because of that, they were able to rebel. Now, once they did rebel and took over that demonic dimension, they had discovered the human dimension and want to go over to that dimension as well, of course, Earth. Now, all that being said, they were the ones going around killing God people because they were trying to study humans by dissecting them. So here's more proof of the idea that Maggot is not the killer at all. Now, with all that being said, now we also learn here that the actual leader of this group is a character known as Pilgrim. Now, when it comes to Pilgrim, it's kind of cool here because for Pilgrim, he looks at Wolverine as this great god. And the reason why, because in an earlier storyline, you had Wolverine, I want to say Nightcrawler as well, went into their actual dimension where you had Wolverine just go berserk, killing off a bunch of the Nakari demons. And because the Rutai were slaves, they watched Wolverine kill off all those Nakaris. But either way, it inspired them to rebel against their slave owners. And so with them now being here and they see Wolverine, they're like, oh my God, it's you. It's our great God. But you didn't have the X-Men fight against Pilgrim and his, well, Rutai followers. Now, with all that being said, the storyline does get wrapped up very quickly here because of one person, Dr. Reyes and her butt. Because with her butt cracking the eye of Kirok, you didn't have basically the X-Men and all the different people being kept in this between dimension all be teleported back to Earth, back to, well, Las Vegas. Now, you do have most of the Rutai head back to their dimension, but when it comes to Pilgrim, he was also able to escape over to Earth, but in a disguise. And so you do have the X-Men being able to celebrate the idea that they were able to save the world because Dr. Reyes, but all the other Karens across the world were also destroyed as well. So for the time being, all of these different portals that lead into a demonic realm is for the time completely closed. But okay, so we're kind of like in this weird situation when it comes to the X-Men at the moment, our coverage over the X-Men. And what I mean by that statement is that we're kind of like in this middle part that leads into the Hunt for Xavier storyline. Like we're technically done with Operation Zero Tolerance, and you do have a few things here and there pop up that kind of reference that last crossover, but getting into the next big X-Men storyline, which is Hunt for Xavier, we're going to have a few story arcs where they may not seem that important, but technically they're building blocks for bigger storylines down the road, like this one right here, because we're going to cover Uncanny X-Men issues number 356 and 357. And with this two-part story arc, again, it may seem like nothing really important, but again, it's building blocks for bigger storylines down the road. And so as we get into Uncanny X-Men issue number 356, we do pick up with Archangel, Beast, and also Iceman as they had just arrived in Alaska in a rental car heading over to where Cyclops and Jean Grey are at. Because when it came to Operation Zero Tolerance, we had learned that for Cyclops, he had a bomb placed inside his body by Bastion. Now, right after Operation Zero Tolerance, we had learned that Dr. Reyes was able to remove the bomb out of his body as a way to save his life. And so when it came to Jean Grey, she kind of requested, but so did the doctor, that her and Cyclops kind of get some rest away from the X-Men. So they went over to Alaska where Cyclops' grandparents live at. And so for those two characters, they're kind of just, relaxing at the moment. But Cyclops left a message at the school of Charles Xavier because he's currently freaking out about Jean Grey. And I'll explain why here in a moment. But while you do have Beast, Archangel, and also Iceman heading over to where Cyclops and Jean Grey are currently staying in Alaska, well, they have a car accident. And the reason why, because they almost hit an animal who was just crossing the road. But this leads into our heroes meeting up with Chris Miller. Now, Chris Miller is the sheriff of the city, but also this dude does not really like mutants, but he has no idea that Cyclops and Jean Grey are mutants, but he knows Scott Summers and Jean Grey and said, hey, if you're friends with theirs, let me go ahead and help you guys get over there because your car is right now completely wrecked out of the accident. And so you do have the sheriff take our heroes over to Cyclops and Jean Grey's home. But before they leave, Iceman saw somebody hiding in the bushes. That guy becomes somewhat important in the second chapter of the storyline. Now we do switch back over to Rogue and Wolverine back at the Institute. Now, this is going to lead into the second plot line of this two-part story arc when it comes to the character of Rogue, because you do have Rogue leaving the school right now to go for a meeting with some other character. Now, for Wolverine, he's waiting for S.H.I.E.L.D. to pick up Sauron. We kind of cut a storyline in an earlier video when you had Sauron attack the school. But for Wolverine, he remembers that for Rogue, she kind of felt in a dark place, and he wants to make sure that she is okay. Now, she does confirm to him like she is okay, but for Wolverine, he's kind of wondering like what's going on with her. But getting back over to Alaska, we do pick up with our three heroes arriving at the home that belongs to, well, Cyclops and Jean Grey for the time being. Now, the sheriff, his wife is there as well. His wife's name is Stacy Murphy Miller, and her sister is Melissa Murphy. Now, Melissa will become not really super important for the storyline, but she is there in the storyline. So I kind of want to go ahead and say, like, who she is so that you guys will recognize her in later parts of this video. But for Jean Grey, she had no idea that they were going to have company for the week or whatever. So to see Beast, Archangel, and also Iceman there is really surprising to her, but at the same time, she's very happy about the idea of seeing her friends. Because remember, this was the first class of the X-Men, these 5 characters right here. Now, when it comes to Cyclops, the reason why he called Beast and also Iceman and Archangel is because in an earlier video, you had Jean Grey just show up out of nowhere wearing the Phoenix outfit. And this kind of leads into the complicated past of Jean Grey. And let me explain. You see, when it came to Jean Grey, back in the early Chris Claremont days, we had saw Jean Grey turn into the Phoenix and also the Dark Phoenix. And so we were kind of left to believe that Jean Grey was the Dark Phoenix, and she died as the Dark Phoenix. But here comes the big plot twist, because later on in Marvel's timeline, you had the Fantastic Four and the Avengers find Jean Grey inside a cocoon. Now, here's the catch, because we saw Jean Grey die as the Dark Phoenix at the end of the Dark Phoenix saga. The thing was, that was never Jean Grey. What the Phoenix did was, after placing Jean Grey inside a cocoon to allow her to heal up properly, you then had the Phoenix turn herself into a copy of Jean Grey and pretended to be Jean Grey and kind of believed she was the real Jean Grey. And so when it came to the Dark Phoenix saga, Jean Grey was never the Phoenix. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and skip over like a few things because we get into Madeline Pryor and the whole idea of Madeline Pryor and Mr. Sinister. But getting into the present day, you had Jean Grey just appear out of nowhere wearing the Phoenix outfit. And so for Cyclops, that's kind of weird because Jean Grey was never the Phoenix. So why in the world is she wearing the Phoenix outfit? And so for Cyclops, is him right now just being on guard, because this is coming right after the Onslaught saga as well, where you had Charles Xavier turn to Onslaught and basically wreck New York and made more problems for, well, the mutant race. And so for Scott, it's him saying like, listen, we have to be on guard when it comes to telepaths like Charles Xavier or Jean Grey or even like Psylocke as well. But getting back over to the Rogue plot line, we do pick up a Rogue right now, meeting up with Aubrey Agee. Now, Aubrey Agee is this scientist who apparently claimed that he has the ability to turn mutants back into regular humans. And apparently he was able to help his sister out as well and turn her into a regular human again. And he wants to help Rogue achieve that same thing as well. The thing was, you had Rogue watch Aubrey leave a company known as Mutopia. And so for Rogue, she wants to know like what is his connection with that company. Now Aubrey says that company's main goal is to try to build a world that's perfect for all races. But for Aubrey, he was kind of invited into the company to help them achieve that goal. But apparently he declined their offer. And the reason why? So that he can continue his work to help mutants turn back into regular humans again. But getting back over to Scott, Jean Grey, Bobby, Iceman, and also Beast, we do see those characters right now heading over to into town to get something to eat. Except when they arrive in town, they see a protest going on. Now, this protest is all about the idea of a group of Native Americans who are very upset about the fact that their people had lost their land over time. So their goal is to hopefully reclaim their lost land. Now, while that protest is going on, you have our heroes continue to go in town, except for Bobby. He does see this old man once again. And this old man is now talking about the idea of the Chulian, the crow god, will make the world black with his shadow. And then the old man once again disappear. But when our heroes go inside the restaurant, we do see a bunch of crows begin to appear over the city. But that leads us into Uncanny X-Men issue number 357, because we now pick up with our heroes just trying their best to enjoy their dinner. Except while doing that, you didn't have our heroes realize that there are a crowd of people out there just freaking out. And so you have our hero decide to leave the restaurant to go help those people out, to realize that those people are being attacked by a bunch of crows. So you have our heroes trying their best to help out, but without using their abilities. And the reason why, because they don't want the town to know that they are mutants. And so they're trying their best. Now, for Bobby, he does see something very interesting, and that would be the guy we saw at the end of the last chapter. Now, he's out there celebrating the idea of these crows just flying around the city. And so we see him right now being excited about it, because he did say earlier the crow god will bring his shadow upon this area. And so we see him right now just being happy. Now, the sheriff of the town, he does appear to help out the situation by firing a shotgun out into the air to hopefully get rid of the crows. But now we have to get into the road plot line just once again. And we do pick up with, Aubrey again, the scientist who apparently has a way to cure mutants. And we see inside his laboratory, and we see him right now talking to somebody. And we kind of find out that he is talking to, his sister, the person he had claimed to cure, who was a mutant and now apparently back to a human. But the problem is that when we look over to see his sister, it does look like that she is deformed, like some kind of creature. So we're kind of wondering, did the process make things worse? Now, technically, we can tell it did, but in his mind, she looks beautiful. But for a brief moment, we do have to shift back over to Alaska, and we do pick up with our first class X-Men, who right now is hanging out in the home belonging to Cyclops and Jean Grey. Well, while being there, you didn't have Jean Grey walk out in her, Phoenix outfit about the idea of getting back out there to help the town out that's currently being attacked by some crows. Now, for the different members of the X-Men, they're beginning to freak out because they're seeing Jean Grey in her Phoenix outfit, just right there, kind of like, whoa, what are you wearing that for? But you didn't have Melissa walk in. Now, Melissa, remember, she is the sister-in-law to the sheriff. And so when she walks into the home, you have the different members of the first class X-Men begin to freak out because for Angel, his wings are out. Beast, he is no longer trying to hide his true form. But for Melissa, she's kind of like, listen, I know you're mutants and I don't care. Matter of fact, I love mutants just as much as I love humans, but I need your guys' help. And the reason why, because my brother-in-law is right now out in the city by himself trying to handle the crow situation, and he might get seriously hurt. We also have to remember about the plot line that's going on when it comes to Bishop and also Deathbird. You see, in an earlier storyline, you had some members of the X-Men go into space and travel over to the Shi'ar Empire to basically help them out. On their way back home, their spaceship got destroyed. Now, most of the X-Men were able to get back to Earth. Bishop did not. Matter of fact, Deathbird at the very last second teleported her and him somewhere else. Now, for Bishop, he was informed the X-Men are dead. But for Bishop, he kind of realized that Deathbird is lying. And the reason why? Because Deathbird has a major crush on Bishop. She wants to be with him. But right now, their current spaceship is about to crash into the sun. And so you have Bishop say, listen, go ahead and free me. I'm not going to leave you. I also love you as well, but I want to survive. And so you have Deathbird kind of realize that he may be serious, and so she does go out of his way to release him. Now, the ending of the storyline is kind of confusing and kind of ends just, well, nowhere. Let me explain. Because you do have our heroes go into Alaska to basically help out with the situation. For Iceman, his goal is to find the guy who they believe might summon the actual crows in the area, while you have Angel and Beast try to see if there is another source for why the crows are attacking people right now in the city, while you have Cyclops and Jean Grey continue to fight against the birds. Now, for Cyclops, he has to be careful. And the reason why, because just recently he had a bomb removed from his body. But the doctors told him, do not use your powers for a short period of time. But for Cyclops, he has no choice. He has to go ahead and use his powers. Now, for Jean Grey, she also finds this mechanical bird, and she kind of believes the bird could be the reason why the crows are right now in this area. But here's the problem with the story, because once you do have our heroes continue to fight against the crows to the point where you have the crows come together to create this huge shadow figure of a bigger crow, but once you do have our heroes being able to get rid of the robot crow, but also like make sure the crows stay away from the city, you have our heroes kind of wonder like, what is the actual reason behind the crows being there? Like, why were they there? And so you have them wonder about different things that could have brought the crows here, but none of those different ideas are actually confirmed. And the book ends on that note right there, leaving you wondering, like, what in the world is going on here when it comes to the crows attacking this town? But okay, so we're kind of like in this weird era for X-Men comics, and let me explain. You see, for me growing up, right, I'm a 94 baby. And so when I got into comics, it was like the early 2000s. And so for me, the X-Men were really popular to me in the early 2000s, going into like 2012, 13, heck, I might say 14. And then after that, it was kind of like a hit or miss when it came to X-Men comics. But for people like, my uncle, my dad from the 80s or 70s, they were really big fans of the early 1990s. And honestly, I can see why. But I kind of realized something. When they said we are the fans of the 90s, they mean 90 up to like 96 to like 97 maybe. 98, 99, 2000, 01, heck, maybe even '02 is kind of like the hit or miss era for them, because again, the X-Men comics weren't the same anymore like they were in the early 1990s. Now, for some folks out there, it was the artwork. For some folks out there, it was the storylines. Because after Age of Apocalypse and the idea of Onslaught, for some fans out there, they're kind of like, okay, where can you take the X-Men next? Like, where can they go next? And that was like the big question for a lot of people, right? And so we're kind of in that weird era. And I kind of see that when it comes to some of the comments, also the views, where like you have some folks say, hey, we're here for the ride, Fresh, but like, oh, I'm telling you right now, these stories aren't my favorite. I'm like, I understand, but let's go ahead and push forward. But honestly, for me, there's still some good storylines in this era. It's very rare, but it's still pretty good. Like, for example, the idea of Psi War. Now, for me personally, I thought Psi War was going to be a storyline based on Psylocke or Jean Grey or even Emma Frost. But the first chapter does a great job in kind of tricking you. And let me explain why. Because as we get into the opening page of the storyline, we pick up with Storm. Now, this is Storm facing one of her fears, the idea of being in closed spaces. And so we're kind of seeing this foreshadowing of what's to come down the road in the storyline, because it does seem like right now it's this nightmare that she's going through. The idea of all the X-Men being dead around her, just closing her in. But then we switch over to the present day. And of course, everyone is awake. And we see Storm right now having a conversation with Wolverine, Maggot, Dr. Reyes, and also Cannonball. Now, the reason why Cannonball is here right now is because this storyline does take place prior to the last few videos we have done when it comes to X-Force, where we saw Cannonball had rejoined X-Force. But when it comes to Storm, we see her talking about a character known as Annette. Now, Annette is kind of like this foster mother to Storm. And let me explain. You see, for Storm, in the early days of her life, as we all know, she lost her parents. and then became a thief on the streets in Africa. And of course, after that, she met someone known as Annette who took her in and gave her that shelter, food, clothing, but especially love and the idea of family once again. And so back in the present day for Storm, she had received a package. Now with that package, it came from Annette with a totem inside of it. When Storm had touched it, it turned into sand, telling Storm there is some kind of situation or trouble back in her homeland. And so for Storm, she has to go back home. Now for Wolverine, you already know, Homeboy is down to help out Storm, including Cannonball, Dr. Reyes, and also Maggot. Now, they're going to get there by using Psylocke. Now, we have talked a lot about this in the past, the idea of the Crimson Dawn. And now, the Crimson Dawn was given to Psylocke a while ago in our coverage over the X-Men, where she was badly injured by Sabretooth. And so you had Archangel, Doctor Strange, Wolverine go into a realm better known as the Crimson Dawn and got the elixir with the same exact name and gave it to Psylocke. Now, it did bring her back to life, but it gave her a connection to the Crimson Dawn realm. Now, with that connection, her personality began to change a tad bit, but also she had gained new abilities as well. The idea of being able to teleport by using shadows. And so for the X-Men right now, they're going to travel through Psylocke's shadows as a way to get to Africa. Now for Marrow, she's kind of like, I'm going to stay behind. But at the very last second, you do have Wolverine grab her and they all head over to Africa, really more Kenya. Except when they do arrive in Kenya, you have Psylocke go ahead and drop off most of the group in the city. Now for her and Wolverine though, they're kind of being teleported away from the city. And the reason why, because they're currently being attacked by a group of warriors. Now for Wolverine and Psylocke, when they fight against these warriors, they begin to turn into sand. Now for Wolverine, he has a plan. The problem is that he disappears with the sand warriors, leaving Psylocke on her own at the moment. Now, when it comes to the rest of the team, they're inside the village where Storm holds to find Annette. But while you do have Storm walking around the area kind of taking everything in, you didn't have the rest of the team realize that the villagers are missing. Like, there's no one out there at all at the moment. Now, for Cannonball, he's been pulled away by some kind of sand creature. So just like that, he's off the board. And you have the rest of the X-Men kind of wondering like, what happened to Cannonball? Matter of fact, where's Psylocke? Where's Wolverine at? And so we do see Storm, Maggot, Dr. Reyes, and also Marrow begin to walk around the area. Except when they do, they find all the different villagers just in this circle. And you have them all just sitting there, like not being able to move. Now, at first, kind of wondering like, what kind of trance are in at the moment? Is it drugs or something else? But you didn't have Maggot realize, no, it's not drugs. It has to be magic. But you did have our heroes be confronted by Annette, except when they find her, she's right now being held by some kind of creature. And she says, hey, welcome home, Storm. I found someone to marry. Meet this powerful god, better known as Edenasi. Now, for a brief moment, I want to shift over to Cannonball. Here's the reason why, because Cannonball at the moment, he kind of realized that after being taken away, he's now back in Kentucky, except he's in the same mines that his father used to work at. And then he's confronted by the spirit of his father, who's basically ashamed of him and begins the process of trying to attack him. So now you get the idea that it's some kind of mind game here at the moment. But when we do jump back over to Storm, Maggot, Dr. Reyes, and also Marrow, well, you have this powerful god basically said, oh, I did all of this as a way to bring you here, Storm. I want you. I want your power. I want you by my side. And so we then see Maggot, Dr. Reyes, and also Marrow, their souls leave their bodies. And just like that, Storm gets ticked off because she's not somebody who easily feared by other people, other creatures, other powerful beings. But now it's up to Storm to fight against this powerful god, basically on her own, unless Psylocke appears here at the very last second. Now, when it comes to Marrow, Maggot, and also Dr. Reyes, we basically get the idea that now you have this powerful God trying to communicate with them in their souls. Kind of like, listen, join my side, kind of the side of good or the side of me where you have everything you want. And so we see him being able to fix Marrow's face. And let me explain, because for Marrow, her mutant abilities, we always saw bones kind of grow out of her body, especially her face. And so it's the idea that her body is no longer being covered by all these different bones growing out of her. She looks normal. Now, it's also the idea of this God trying to say the X-Men are liars, because for Dr. Reyes, Maggot, and also Marrow, they're new to the team. So it's him right now trying to show the darker version, the secret behind all the different members of the X-Men. But when we do switch back over to Storm, Psylocke does appear. Now for Psylocke, she does inform Storm that right now they're not really being confronted by a powerful God. That matter of fact, this God is a telepath who has gone out of his way to use his abilities to control the minds of the people in the village. Now, you do have Psylocke take Storm to the astral plane, or she calls it the Psi plane, and kind of show her all the different minds of the villagers that are connected to one another, but being controlled by this powerful God. Now, when the powerful God does appear on the Psi plane or the astral plane, you have Psylocke go ahead and battle against him. Now, this right here is really important because while you have the two characters battling against one another, Storm is then confronted by her foster mother, who says, hey, listen, Anansi is a god who's known as a trickster. He is always lying because he always has his own plan, his own agenda. And so for Storm, she began to realize that once Psylocke had appeared, the powerful god is no longer focusing on Storm, but now focusing on Psylocke. Like all of this was technically done as a way to get to Psylocke. And as the battle goes on, we do see the trickster had basically set up a trap for Psylocke, where once she does hit a certain point on the astral plane, there is this Psi wave, this powerful wave that travels across the astral plane, but into the real world, affecting all the minds across the entire world. It doesn't stop there because with this Psi wave full of psionic energy, it does affect all the telepaths across the world as well. Emma Frost, Cable as well. With that kind of energy hitting them, they're no longer really able to do anything on the astral plane anymore. And so with the with the idea of it no longer a threat being on the astral plane, this powerful God is now in position to do whatever he wants on the astral plane, to play with the minds of all the different people across the world. But here's the thing though, this powerful being is not a god, not a trickster, or yeah, it's trickster, but not a god. It's the Shadow King. It's him finally coming back into the picture again. And we have not seen the Shadow King in a very long time since the Muir Island saga. And so as we dive into issue number 78, we get our answers to how the Shadow King is back. But first, we see the Shadow King just bringing chaos across the entire world. I mean, chaos, fear. Like he is touching the minds of all the different people across the world at the moment. Now, for the Shadow King, again, the last time we saw him was at the end of the Muir Island saga. We were left to believe that he had died. But it's the Shadow King saying, no, as long as there's a dark thought out there in the world, I will always survive. But on top of that as well, he stayed hidden on the astral plane. He stayed hidden from Charles Xavier. And so that is why our heroes were kind of left to believe the Shadow King was officially dead. But in reality, he wasn't. And so once you had the whole events of Onslaught happen, and with Charles right now missing and no longer being the guardian of, well, the astral plane, it allowed the Shadow King to begin the process of his plan to become the ruler of the astral plane, to touch the minds of all the different people across the planet. He has officially won, it seems like. Now, for Psylocke, Her mind is completely broken. We're kind of left to believe that she's going to die here on the astral plane. And technically she does, I guess. But when she does die on the astral plane, that basically means she's dead in the real world as well. But with her out of the way, it now allows the Shadow King to play mind games on the rest of the members of the X-Men. And let me explain, because we do see the Shadow King go over to Marrow, Dr. Reyes, and also Maggot, the newest members of the team. And his goal right now is how to break down their barriers, to allow him inside their mind so that he can corrupt their mind, bring out the worst fears, make them go insane. But right now, he has to trick them to make them take him in. And so what he says right now is like, listen, I can give you everything you want. Like, for example, Marrow, you want a normal face so that you'll have the ability to date and not be judged by the way you look. Dr. Reyes, you want your old life back before Operation Zero Tolerance, to be a surgeon again. And Maggot, you want to be a true hero. Like, guys, I can give that to you. And he lies about what he's doing to the rest of the X-Men team. Hey, listen, Cannonball, what he wanted was his family. Wolverine, to get rid of his animal side. For Storm, the idea to lose her fear of closed spaces. Like, guys, listen, I'm helping them. I can help you as well. He's trying to trick them. But then we learn very quickly here that for Psylocke, she's not officially dead. That matter of fact, Psylocke is alive, but thanks to the Crimson Dawn once again. And so with the Crimson Dawn going out of its way to save her life and giving her that second chance, she's now taking on this dark form. Now this dark form allows her the ability to not be noticed by the Shadow King. This works out very well. But also when it comes to Annette, she's also found by Psylocke as well. And so you have Psylocke being able to break her free, but it also kind of put her in the shadows as well, this dark form, to make sure the Shadow King cannot pick up on her presence. But their main goal at the moment right now is to free Storm. Now, we do get a couple of panels here that kind of show us, how much chaos is happening across the city. And I kind of like it because, most of the time we only see like a small piece of the chaos being done. It's supposedly the entire world is being affected. Like, for example, the idea of only seeing Manhattan or some other part of New York. But we now see that, no, it's happening across the world. It's affecting a lot of people's minds at the moment. But getting back over to the idea of, Annette and also Psylocke going out of their way to save Storm's life, they find Storm. The problem is right now for Storm, she's being tortured at the moment by all her past failures. And let me explain. You see, for Storm, we see that she blames herself for not being small enough when she was a young girl, when it came to saving her parents' life after the building had collapsed on them. She blames herself for what she had to do to stop Marrow by pulling out of Marrow's heart, one of Marrow's hearts, as a way to stop Marrow from killing off a group of humans. She also blames herself for being tricked by the Shadow King, which could possibly lead into the end of the world. Now, for Annette, she does ask Psylocke one question. Can you bring my memories to life? And Psylocke says yes. And she says, Storm, I need you to remember this right here. Remember that you had used your powers for good. Let's not forget the time where our country, our land, was not getting any kind of rain at all. Crops were not growing properly at all. We were basically starving, but you brought in the rain. And when you did, everything worked out. The crops began to grow. Food was being grown for people. People were no longer starving. It's all because of you, Storm, because you have done great things as well. And so with her kind of showing the good things Storm has done in the world, Storm breaks out of that mind torture. And now Storm, Psylocke, Annette can work together to bring down the Shadow King. But like we saw earlier, when it comes to Psylocke and also Annette, when Psylocke knew abilities coming out of the Crimson Dawn, kind of giving her and Annette those shadow forms, you have Psylocke give Storm a shadow form as well. And the reason why, because again, the Shadow King cannot detect them, allowing Storm and Annette to move freely around Shadow King while you have Psylocke try to distract them. Now, while you do have Storm and Annette being able to break Marrow, Dr. Reyes, and Maggot free, for Marrow, she realized somebody else calling out for help. She realized it was Cannonball, and she owes him one. Now, this begins the process of the possibility of these two characters dating, because we saw this in an X-Force video where for Cannonball, he was kind of thinking about Marrow. Well, this is why, because you have Marrow go out of her way, to help Cannonball overcome his nightmare. But getting back over to Psylocke, once you had the Shadow King realize what's going on with Psylocke's plan, he begins to attack her. And so for Psylocke, she has no choice here but to go one-on-one once again against the Shadow King, except this time she's going to win. And this is how she wins, because when it comes to Psylocke, she realized she has to humble the Shadow King, because he's now getting a tad bit overconfident. He's now trying to spread himself thin by trying to take over the astral plane to attack all the minds across the world. But he's now leaving his nexus point just wide open, where all his power is being stored at, being wide open for an attack. And for Psylocke, that's perfect. And so we see her just go after it. Now, when she does, it's her now absorbing the Shadow King into her mind. But here's the thing, because it was also Marvel saying, let's put Psylocke on the back burner. Let's do things a tad bit different with her character possibly. Because with the idea of the Shadow King now being in her mind, she now no longer able to use her abilities at all anymore. Again, officially putting her on the back burner. But if she ever does use her ability, it is then going to release the Shadow King back into the astral plane. And so when she does that, well, the day is saved. But it's her, Tony Storm, and the rest of the team like, I can no longer be an X-Men because my powers are now officially gone, with the Shadow King now being in my mind. But at least I did save the day and save the world. And okay, so let's go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. Now, with that being said, when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, we might spend a little bit more time covering the main X-Men team and rather covering the other like X teams out there. So X-Force or Generation X, even like Cable and X-Men solo books as well. Going to focus more on the main X-Men team here for the moment. And so we're going to cover Uncanny X-Men issues number 358 and 359. Now, technically, both issues are kind of like one-shots. And so as we get into Uncanny X-Men issue number 358, we have to remember a few things going on with the character better known as Bishop. You see, there was this storyline that we had covered not too long ago that involved our X-Men team getting pulled into a space adventure where they had to help out the Shi'ar Empire. Now, once they were able to achieve that goal, you did have our heroes try to make it back to Earth. And they almost did until they got into an accident. Now, most of the X-Men, they were able to get back to Earth. Bishop was not. And the reason why, because in that same storyline, we had saw Deathbird began to fall in love with Bishop. And so at the very last second, when it came to the X-Men being able to get back over to Earth, she grabbed Bishop and basically took him away. And when he woke back up, at first he believed he was paralyzed, which is also a lie, but also he was told by Deathbird that the X-Men are dead, which again is another lie. Now, once you have Bishop kind of realize that Deathbird was lying, well, our two characters had crash landed on a random planet. And so as we get into the opening pages for Uncanny X-Men issue number 358, we're now picking up with Bishop and also, well, Deathbird. Now, really more Bishop right now, trying his best to protect Deathbird. She does get her second win and begin to help him out in this actual battle, but we see our heroes being completely surrounded by these creatures. Now, luckily for our heroes, they do have somebody go out of their way to help them out. And that'll be the character known as Corel. Now, when it comes to Corel, he also informs us the creatures that were attacking Deathbird and also Bishop, they're better known as Knit. and I really hope I pronounced that correctly. But either way, his main goal right now is to help our heroes get out of this situation, so he gives them a free ride over somewhere else. Now, he had a camp nearby, but that camp was found by the Cadet and got completely destroyed. And so, unfortunately, they have to go somewhere else. And so you have Carell take Bishop and Deathbird over to a shop owner's shop, better known as Two. Now for Two, like I said, a shop owner, he's a guy you go to for different items you may need or different items you want to trade in. But when it comes to Carell, we kind of get his backstory here. You see, on his home world, it was completely wrecked by the Jeanette. And so what he did was he came over to their home world to find a powerful weapon to use against Connect back on his home world to finally bring peace to his home world once again. Unfortunately, he got stuck on this planet. And so his main goal right now is to use a warp gate to hopefully get him back home to his world. And so while you do have Carell kind of explain things to both Bishop and also Deathbird, it's also him asking to the shop owner if they could hide right now at his shop until later on in the day, where of course they'll try their best to journey over to the warp gate. Now, we do see Two make a call to somebody else, but before we're able to learn where that call is going to, we have to switch over to Earth real quick. And the reason why, because we have to get into the plot line going on with Jean Grey, Beast, Iceman, Angel, and also Cyclops. Sorry, Archangel. Because in our last video for Uncanny X-Men, we had talked about the idea that you had Cyclops and Jean Grey wanting to leave the X-Men to kind of give Cyclops time to recover because things happened to him back in Operation Zero Tolerance. The whole idea of having a bomb placed inside your body and having that bomb also removed from your body can do a lot of damage to your actual body. And so he needs some time to recover. Except while you had Jean Grey and Cyclops stay in Alaska to, spend some time away from the X-Men, well, you had Jean Grey put on her Phoenix outfit. And for Cyclops, he was kind of concerned and called in Beast, Iceman, and also Archangel, the original members of the X-Men team, the first class X-Men. Now, that storyline right there did not really lead anything major, but while you do have them all right now packing up to help Cyclops and Jean Grey move somewhere else in Alaska because, well, in our last video, they were kind of outed as mutants, and of course the town is now turning their back against them. They want to leave. But while you do have the 5 X-Men right now trying to pack up, well, out of nowhere, you have Jean Grey just collapse on the ground. Now, this is a callback to our last X-Men video, better known as X-Men Psi War, where you had Psylocke fighting Shadow King on the astral plane. And once you had a Shadow King being able to take over the astral plane, he made sure all psychics across the world were just completely wrecked and could not challenge him on the astral plane, including Jean Grey. Now, this kind of leads into, so getting back over to Bishop and also Deathbird, you have the two characters right now with Carell as they do make their way over to the town where the warp gate is being held at. Now, once they do arrive in the actual town, well, the Cadet, and I really hope I pronounced their names correctly, begin to attack that town as a way to get to Bishop and also Deathbird, and Carell as well too. Now, for Bishop, he hates the idea of seeing innocent people being attacked and killed because the enemies are coming after him and also Deathbird. And so he tells Deathbird and Carell, go without him. He's going to stay behind for a short period of time to at least help the people out in the city, and hopefully once he's done, he'll still be able to make it to the warp gate. Now for Deathbird, she's not really down with the idea of helping people out, and for her, she looks at that for Bishop being weak right now, going out of his way to help people in need when technically his own needs to take care of. But either way, Bishop does stay behind. I just realized I forgot to mention that when it came to Bishop, Corell, and also Deathbird, they were founded earlier by the creature because let's not forget, when it came to two, he was making a phone call. That phone call was to inform the Connect where they could find Bishop, Deathbird, and also Corell at. And of course, they did find them, but our heroes got away. But getting back over to the present day, sorry about that. Once you do have Bishop being able to get to the warp gate, we see Corell being able to use the warp gate to get home. The problem is the warp gate does get destroyed. Now for Bishop, at first, he believes that Deathbird had officially left him behind. But then you have Bishop realize that Deathbird did not leave him behind. And for me personally, it kind of shows that Deathbird is beginning to slowly change because yes, she truly does love this man a lot. Now, for our two heroes, they once again have to find another way to get off this planet and to get Bishop back over to, well, Earth. Now, when it comes to Uncanny X-Men issue number 359, it's really more of us wrapping up the whole plot line involving Rogue. And let me explain. When it comes to Rogue, she has really trying to find a way to get rid of her abilities so that she can finally have the chance to touch people again without the ability of harming their bodies or their minds or taking away their powers or absorbing their memories and personas into her own mind as well. And so for Rogue, she did find a way. Now, before we explore that way, we had to switch over to Cyclops and Jean Grey. And the reason why, because what we saw in the last video we did for the regular X-Men series involving the idea of Psylocke going up against Shadow King, well, for Jean Grey, she kind of feels like she lost the ability of being a telepath. She can't hear the minds of people. She can't touch the astral plane. We saw why, because when it came to the Shadow King, he made sure all telepaths across the world were moved out of his way to give him the chance to technically win. But now we're able to switch over to the Rogue storyline again. Now for Rogue, let's not forget that she met a doctor earlier in our coverage over the X-Men, a doctor known as Dr. Agi. Now, when it comes to Dr. Agi, he was the scientist who claimed that he has a way to shut down the mutant gene and mutants' bodies to allow them to be regular people again. And so for Rogue, she wants that. She wants to have the chance to touch people again before her powers had activated. And so for Dr. Agi, he did promise her that. Now, for Dr. Agi, we also learned that apparently he had helped his sister. The problem is that we saw his sister, and it did kind of seem like she was transform a tad bit. Did not look a tad bit normal there. So it's kind of like, did his machine work? But we see Dr. Agi right now having a meeting in the different room away from Rogue with a senator, his wife, and also Guy Ridge as well. So kind of getting the idea that for Dr. Agi, he was always working for the government in a way. But either way, when you do have Rogue kind of sit down and about to go inside the machine to get ready to have her powers taken away from her, well, out of nowhere, a scientist who works there begins to shoot up the place. Now, because Rogue did not go through the actual machine yet, she still has her abilities, but also let's not forget that a long time ago in Marvel Comics, Rogue had absorbed the powers of Miss Marvel. So with her having the powers with her, you didn't have Rogue being able to chase down the scientists that had begun to shoot up the place. But you didn't have Rogue realize that that person who had shot up the place, well, it was Mystique. Now we're also kind of given another page to kind of explore the idea that Jean Grey may have lost the ability to hear the minds of different people across the world. And it really does bother Jean Grey a lot because that also means she's no longer able to read the mind of Cyclops, the man she truly loves. But as we do switch back over to Rogue and also Mystique, we see the two characters having this conversation where is Mystique telling Rogue that her plan at first was not to go out of her way to save Rogue's life or to stop Rogue from giving up her abilities. That for Mystique, she had overheard about the machine. And so her main goal back then was to find a way to get close to Dr. Agi and shut down his machine. But that was when she found Rogue about doing one of the biggest things in her life, which was giving up her abilities. Now, it's also Mystique saying that if it does work for you, meaning that you being the first person it actually works on, you don't realize the government will then go out of their way to basically use it on more mutants by force rather than, giving them a choice. Now, for Rogue, she kind of believes it's not really a bad idea. And the reason why, because it will stop all the fighting that's going on right now between humans and also mutants. But Mystique saying that no, their main goal is not really bring peace, but to get rid of us, to kill all mutants across the board. Now, it's also Mystique saying, like, listen, if you give up your powers, then who are you? But for Rogue, that's the big problem right there, because over the years, she has touched so many people. And with her doing that, that basically means that she had absorbed all these different personas into her mind. She's no longer just herself. And for Rogue, she wants to be just herself. But for Rogue, she also wants some answers. So she knocks out Mystique and leaves to get those answers. And we can kind of go ahead and like skip to the point where we do sit down and see Rogue going back to the lab. And you have Rogue work her way over to Dr. Agi. And once she does that, you also have Mystique reappear as well, kind of saying like, hey, Rogue, you did not completely knock me out, so I was able to catch up very quickly. But you didn't have Rogue go ahead and touch Dr. Agi. And the reason why, to absorb his memories, but also kind of figure out if his machine will truly work. But she also learns that when it came to Dr. Agi, over time, he had used different people to be like part of his major experiments. And those people were mutants who were kind of forced against their will to see if his machine could truly work. And most of those people had died, except for his sister. But like we saw earlier, she was deformed. And so for Rogue, she realized that technically right now, his machine does work perfectly. But for Rogue, she realized even if she goes out of her way to have her powers taken away, she can't live with the fact that there'll be other people out there who have no choice at all, being forced by will to have their powers taken away from them because the government says so. And so for Rogue, she realized she has to get rid of the machine. And so we do see Rogue go out of her way to destroy the machine that Dr. Agi had built. For a brief moment, we do switch over to Cyclops and Jean Grey. And when we do, it's really more Jean Grey still being upset about the idea that she may have lost her ability of being a telepath, but it's also her kind of upset the fact that she ruined Cyclops' plan. Because for Cyclops, like I said earlier, he was not badly injured. He had a bomb placed inside of him back in Operation Zero Tolerance, but the bomb was removed. And they came to Alaska to recover, but he had big plans for the X-Men, so he wanted to go back home. But now for Jean Grey, she needs some time away from the X-Men. So that means these two characters, for another reason, will not be part of the main X-Men team for the moment. They'll stay in Alaska. So you do have the book end on the note where you do have Rogue head back over to school of Charles Xavier with her power still intact. But you also have Wolverine kind of tell Rogue that he knew what she was going through, but also knew that he didn't have a right to tell her what to do. She had to make that choice on her own. And so this is where, okay, so it's time for us to officially sit down and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And so with that being said, we're going to cover the Uncanny X-Men and Fantastic Four Annual 1998. Yes, the X-Men and Fantastic Four are once again crossing over. Now, with the actual cover of this book, you don't really see the two parties fighting against one another, but you do have the two parties being very angry, but not towards one another. And you see what I mean here as we go through today's storyline. But first, we have to jump over to New York as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, and we pick up with a character known as Dr. Baynon. Now, for Dr. Baynon, he works for one of the branches to Star Fujikawa. And so while working in one of the branches, he had created this device that will allow him the ability to shrink down different objects around him. Now, while you do have the guy being very excited about the idea of finishing this project, project, well, that is when one of his friends say, hey, dude, let's go because right now, Dr. Reed Richards is going to reveal one of his new devices and we should go see what it could possibly be. Now, for Dr. Bainon, he does not like Reed at all, but he still goes either way. And so we see here that for Reed Richards, he had also created a device that will also allow him the ability to shrink down different objects around him. But his device is more handheld, smaller than the one Dr. Bainon had created earlier. And so once you do have the doctor see what Reed had created, he does express how angry he is. But unfortunately, he does get escorted away because they're kind of like, dude, you're getting a tad bit too wild. You gotta go because honestly, you're getting a tad bit too worked up right now over this. But now it's time to get the X-Men involved. And so now we switch over to Beast and also Dr. Reyes. Now for Dr. Reyes, we get the idea that basically she's just bored at the moment because between the different missions the X-Men go on, they don't really do much between those different missions. And so for Beast, he's kind of like, this is perfect. Because for Beast, he is, I guess, a single man again. He's kind of like, hey, Dr. Reyes, why don't you and I go on a date over to an opera? And she does agree to go with him. But while you do have the two characters at the moment kind of, set their date up, we see that Wolverine is trying to force Cannonball to come to poker night. Now, there was an earlier storyline that we had covered when it came to Cannonball, where he pretended he had no idea how to play poker, but in reality, the dude's like a master when it comes to poker. And so right now, it's Wolverine forcing him to come to poker night, but it's also Wolverine saying like, dude, I need another set of eyes because the person I play with at nighttime, he loves to cheat in poker. But getting back over to the Doctor plot line, we see the Doctor right now trying to introduce his brand new device to his bosses. Here's the problem though, because for Reed Richards, he went out of his way to make sure that other people couldn't copy him. But also you have his bosses, the Doctor bosses, kind of like, dude, what are you doing? Like you are literally trying to copy the most recent project that Reed Richards had just revealed to the entire world. And so because of that right there, they're kind of like, dude, you are officially fired. Get out of the building. Now, because the Doctor did work at that branch of Star Fujikawa, you did have to remember that there are different things that Tony Stark had collected and kept at that branch right there. And so you had the Doctor break into the building and find some kind of armor suit and device to use against Reed Richards and maybe the rest of the Fantastic Four. And matter of fact, we do switch over to the Fantastic Four. Now, for Reed and also Susan, they're going out for the night to go attend another opera. Now, for Ben Grimm, he already has plans, and those plans is poker night. So it's him and Wolverine getting together to play poker against one another. But just like we saw Wolverine forcing Cannonball to come to poker night, we see Ben Grimm is also forcing Jeany, the Human Torch, to come to poker night as well. But now we have to switch over to the Opera House. Now, when we do, we see that you have the Beast and you also have Dr. Reyes arriving at the same time as Reed Richards and Susan arrive as well to the Opera House. Now, while you do have both parties kind of trying to get settled in, well, backstage, we see the Doctor right now carrying some device. Now, that device will become very important for the rest of the storyline, because that device belongs to the Psycho Man. And when it comes to that device, it has the ability to play with people's emotions. And so for the Doctor, unfortunately, he has no idea how to properly work the entire device. And so he begins to press buttons left and right. Now, with him doing that, you then have different people at the Opera House begin to act differently. Some folks are scared, like Reed Richards, or you have some folks full of anger, like Dr. Reyes and also Susan. I almost said Susan Storm, but Susan Richards. So right now we're seeing a lot of different emotions when it came to the Doctor pressing all those buttons on the Psycho Man's device. But as we do switch over to Poker Night, we do see that currently Poker Night is going pretty well. We also kind of get the idea that once again, Cannonball just hustled everybody, but also that is when you have our heroes be attacked by what seems to be the Psycho Man. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to explain who he is right now. I'm probably going to do that at the end of this video for a good reason why. But anyways, when it comes to the Psycho Man, he begins to attack our four heroes, but you do have our four heroes begin to work together as a way to bring down the Psycho Man. But back at the Opera House, things are still going off left and right. You have people just acting wild and crazy at the moment. But while that's happening, you didn't have Reed Richards being able to shoot out a signal to call in the rest of the Fantastic Four. That means the Human Torch and also Ben Grimm. But right after you have Reed being able to shoot out that signal to call in the rest of the Fantastic Four, well, you didn't have the Doctor continue to press all those different buttons on the Psycho Man's device. The problem is that with him doing that, it begins to shut down. And with it shutting down, that also means every single person at the Opera House begin to turn back to normal. Now, right after that, you do have Cannonball and also Human Torch arrive there first. The reason why, because for Ben Grimm and also Wolverine, they were trying to have a race with their own vehicles. The problem is that their vehicles got ruined, and so it's kind of like, cool, they now have to take a taxi to get over to the Opera House. But once again, you do have our heroes be attacked by the Psycho Man, except this time it's just Wolverine and Ben Grimm having to work together to bring down the Psycho Man. But like we saw earlier, we do see Ben Grimm and Wolverine being able to work together and bring down the Psycho Man, except when they do that, they realize that they were never fighting against the Psycho Man. That instead, they were fighting against a robot that was just hiding inside the actual armor suit that belongs to the Psycho Man to have our heroes believe hey, listen, you're fighting against one of your old foes. But of course, in reality, that's not the case at all. But once you do have all the different heroes being able to regroup at the Opera House, you then have our heroes being able to find the Doctor, who is backstage, holding the device still in his hands. Now, when he does try to get away, of course, you do have our heroes trying their best to chase him down. But the problem is that for the Doctor, he then runs into the real Psycho Man. Now, when it comes to the Psycho Man, he first appeared back in, I want to say Fantastic Four Annual number 5, but for Psycho Man, he's basically from the Microverse. Now, the Microverse is a really shrunk down universe that's in the main Marvel universe. Now, for the Microverse, the problem was that they were kind of getting crowded down there, overpopulated. And so for the Psycho Man, one of his main goals is to find a way to help spread out the actual microverse, or to find new places for people to go to that comes from the microverse. But he was also the one that had created that device that controls all the different people's emotions. Now, with the real Psycho Man now being here, it's kind of like, okay, cool, it's now time to wrap this story up. And technically that is true, because for the Psycho Man, while fighting against our heroes, you didn't have the Doctor go out of his way to turn on the device that he created earlier. The problem is that that device got badly damaged. And so when you have our heroes, so the Psycho Man, right at the Doctor, well, you have the Doctor and Psycho Man, what seems to be both went into the microverse. And the Doctor now is lost in there until our heroes can find a way to bring him back out of the microverse, but back into the main Marvel universe. And the book does kind of end on that note right there. Like I said, guys, this storyline was kind of just random, but at the same time, I still enjoy it for the most part. But with all right, y'all, it's now time for us to officially sit down and dive into the Hunt for Xavier. Now, this storyline right here is going to wrap up our latest X-Men playlist. And then, of course, we're going to move on to the next crossover, which also means a brand new playlist as well. Now, for the Hunt for Xavier storyline, it wasn't really a big, huge crossover. It wasn't like you had X Factor or X-Men or Excalibur, X-Force. You only had the two main X-Men teams, Uncanny X-Men and X-Men. That was really it when it came to the whole storyline. So the other books out there are not really involved in this. But it's also the idea of finally bringing Charles Xavier back into the picture again, because after Onslaught, after he had disappeared midpoint in our coverage in the Hunt for Xavier playlist, we had no idea where he was at. And now we're beginning to learn where he is at, but also the X-Men are not the only ones trying to find the professor. Now, as we get into the opening pages for Uncanny X-Men issue number 362, we're really picking up with the idea of a callback here. And let me explain, because we had talked a lot about different things going on with the X-Men. One of the last things we did talk about is the idea of Pyro. Now, for Pyro, he had the legacy virus. As you all know, legacy virus is killing off mutants left and right. It was brought from the future into the present day by a character known as Strife. And so for the legacy virus, for the last few playlists we have covered, you have the X-Men trying their best to figure out what is the actual way to cure the legacy virus. The problem is that they can't find a cure at all. But when it comes to Pyro, unfortunately, he had gotten the legacy virus. And unfortunately, the dude's on the last part of the legacy virus, where it makes his power go a tad bit crazier than usual, and he's not really able to control it. But also, his mind is all over the place as well. And so we pick up in Nebraska. Now, with us being in Nebraska, what we're seeing right now is Pyro going wild, just burning down homes and crops in Nebraska all over the place. And so, of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. is now getting evolved. Now, with Nick Fury being in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. again, this is also like him saying, hey, you know what? This is a big, huge mutant problem. Let's go ahead and call in the X-Men. Now, we also have to remember that for the mutant race and the human race, their relations right now at an all-time low. And the reason why, because, well, X-Men Onslaught, the idea of Charles Xavier going crazy, wrecking New York, killing off some of the Earth heroes, but in reality, they're just pushed into the Heroes Reborn reality. But for the public, they believe that Onslaught had killed off the Avengers, the Fantastic Four. For the human race, they hate the mutants. Now, there are also some other things that happen leading into the storyline where right now, for the public, the human race, they're kind of like, we don't like mutants. But also, it's the same thing going now for the government as well, trying to find different ways to police the mutant race when it comes to them being around and also being, well, a problem. But it's Nick Fury saying, all right, y'all have like a few minutes to get in there, save lives, but also stop Pyro. But it's also Pyro screaming out for one particular name: Charles Xavier. It seems like he wants to see Charles Xavier, but the question is now, why? We then switch over to Charles Xavier. Now, when we do, it's really more of us seeing Charles in some kind of dream sequence where he believes that he was able to achieve his lifetime goal. The idea of mutants and humans living together in harmony. Like everything worked out for him. Now, Magneto is also here in his dream sequence, but it does seem like right now he's not real. But somebody else in the shadows does confront Charles and tell Charles, I need you right now to wake up and continue to run, because right now we have to get the heck out of here. Now, just in case anybody is wondering, like, hey, Fresh, where is Dr. Reyes? Dr. Reyes, who had joined the X-Men, by this point kind of left the X-Men, really more Marvel, putting her on the back burner, because we see that she had opened up a clinic nearby the school. So she's over there for the time being. But we also see that while the X-Men are gone and while they're trying to receive packages, if they're not there, it goes to her clinic. And so this new package came all the way over from Muir Island from Moira McTaggart. Now, if we do switch back over to the main X-Men team, we do see that for Storm, she tells the X-Men to break up into two different teams. The first team is really more of us seeing Wolverine, Colossus, and also Gambit go out of their way to stop Pyro. The rest of the X-Men with Storm right now to save innocent lives. Now, for Wolverine, for Logan, he's not really trying to be a team player and kind of goes on his own way, but it still helps the X-Men find a way to bring down Pyro by the end of this chapter here. Now, while all that is going on, we see Gambit having a conversation with another woman who's in his gas form, but this other woman is reminding Gambit about their deal. And apparently, it seems like their deal involves Pyro. So for Gambit, it does seem like he's supposed to bring Pyro over to this mysterious woman. But it also seems like, once again, for Gambit, he's going to betray the X-Men once again. Now, you do have Marrow kind of bring up this conversation where you have the X-Men trying to pull off all their goals because she wants to understand what makes Charles Xavier so special, so worthy. And you have Gambit and a few other members of the X-Men tell her, like, you don't understand. Like, this man is not just trying to achieve some kind of goal where it's mutants and humans being able to live together in harmony. It's also the idea that that man would go out of his way and risk everything for our lives. So in return, we should also try to risk our lives to bring him home. And so with all that being said, when it comes to the X-Men, they're right now trying to get to Pyro. And when it comes to Pyro, we see that he's freaking out so much, he kind of goes back and forth. There's one point where he wants to see Charles Xavier, but then another point where he does not want to see Charles at all. He goes back and forth. But we also learn that for Pyro, he's running away from something or someone because when it comes to Pyro, he's freaking out. He does not want to be captured at all. But for the X-Men, they're not really able to get close to Pyro. But you did have somebody come from behind to take Pyro out. And you did have the X-Men finally being able to move in and give Pyro over to S.H.I.E.L.D. But the problem is now, who in the world had helped out the X-Men? Now, we then switch back over to the school of Charles Xavier because we learn here that for Moira McTaggart, what she had did was she sent over a Muir Island version of Cerebro that Nightcrawler had built back in Excalibur comics. Now, for Kitty Pryde, she begins to use the Cerebro to hopefully find Charles Xavier. The problem is right now, he's popping up in two different locations, one in Russia, one in San Francisco. Now for Storm, Homegirl got a plan already. Let's go ahead and break up into two teams. One team goes to Russia, one team goes to San Francisco. Just like that. Now, the next thing is that at the end of this chapter, we see something crash in San Francisco. That thing has also got the signature of Charles Xavier, also trying to hunt down Charles Xavier. And so now we transition into the next chapter, X-Men issue number 82. And we now pick up with the first X-Men team. That will be Colossus, Storm, Gambit, and Rogue as they head over to Russia. Now, when they do head over to Russia, they're kind of going into the mountains, but they also find this ice castle as well. Now, this chapter right here is going to bring in some old characters that we have not seen in a good while when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Two characters. The first one, we don't really get the chance to see her face at first, but the other one is Renee Montcalm. Now, for Renee Montcalm, she was this character that appeared over in X Factor comics where you had Genosha trying their best to bring in a new government, the idea of mutants and humans being able to live together. There were a few more storylines involved when it came to Genosha, but when it came to Renee, it was also her trying her best to handle one of the big legacy virus outbreaks in her country. And so she came over to America to find Charles Xavier, hoping that he could possibly help her advance her research of finding a cure for the legacy virus. Now, the question is, why in the world is she here right now in Russia in this ice castle with our other mysterious character? But while you have the X-Men walking around this ice castle, and you kind of have Gambit be a jerk here. You know what? Pause real quick. So for Gambit, it's really him not telling Rogue the truth once again. Like he's hiding something else from her. And until he's able to handle that situation over there, him and Rogue can no longer be together. And for Rogue, she's kind of like, hey, Gambit, I want to cuddle with you. I want to hold your hand. I want to be with you. For Gambit, he keeps pushing Rogue away. Now, with all that being said, while you have the X-Men right now walking around this ice castle, they find all the different monks who used to live inside that castle officially dead. Now, while they're walking around, the X-Men, they have no idea they're being watched by Renee, our mysterious character, and another character known as Charlie. But you didn't have the X-Men walk through this doorway. Now, when they do, they're kind of being hit with all these different alternate realities all at once. And for the X-Men, it's pretty hard for them right now to kind of work their way through all these different alternate realities they're being hit with. Now, for Rogue, she's the only one being able to kind of move her way through this alternate realities hitting the team. Because for Rogue, over the years, she had touched so many people that their personas were in her mind. And so she kind of learned how to handle that and keep her mind in a normal state. And so being in something like this, it's very easy for her to navigate, find the rest of her team, and try her best to get them out of there. Now, we also learned that for the X-Men, they're also being affected by somebody else, a character known as Nina. Now, we met Nina at the very end of Onslaught going into the Operation Zero Tolerance playlist. For Nina, she was a prisoner of Bastion as well, alongside with Charles Xavier. But for Charles, he was able to get her the heck out of there. And that was the last time we saw her at the end of the epilogue for Onslaught event. But when it comes to Nina right now, we're kind of wondering how in the world did she get here in this ice castle with Renee? But also, who's Charlie? Now, we also learn here that for Nina and also Renee, they have no idea that they're currently hurting the X-Men at the moment. Because right now, the Charlie is telling her that they are intruders, but in reality, they're not. And so once you do have the X-Men being able to get out of that alternate realities room of theirs and get back to their own main Marvel universe, they are then confronted by Nina and also Renee, where you do have Renee realize who they are, that our heroes are the X-Men and they are good guys. But for Nina, she's very upset. And the reason why, because when it came to Gambit blowing the door down earlier in this chapter alone, the door is now unlocked. For Nina and Renee, they were trying their best to keep something out of this room. And that would be an alternate version of Cerebro, who's also right now trying to fight against the X-Men and also apparently capture Nina as well, who's also a mutant. Now we do shift over to Uncanny X-Men issue number 363. Now with this issue being part 3, we do pick up with the other X-Men team who are in San Francisco. Now we also see another Cerebro unit, or not really a Cerebro unit, but more of a Cerebrite beta. Cerebrites are really more like smaller units of Cerebro that he's using right now as a way to complete different missions. But when it comes to this unit, it had also arrived in San Francisco to look for Charles Xavier. Now we do shift over to Charles Xavier, and it does seem to be the real Charles Xavier. The problem is right now with the real Charles Xavier, he's a prisoner, but no longer a prisoner for the government, but more of a prisoner for the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now for me personally, I don't like this chapter. Let me explain why. It's Toad. Because in the early 1990s, you had Marvel go out of their way to kind of give Toad some love there. It kind of did seem like Toad become the next big villain over in, I want to say X-Force comics to be correct, but either way, it did seem like for Toad, he'll become the next big bad guy, or one of the big bad guys for X-Force or the X-Men team. But the way he's talking right now, he's not really the old Toad we saw in the early 1990s. I don't like that. But either way, for Charles Xavier, he is a prisoner to the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, we also see that for the X-Men, they also arrived in San Francisco. Here's a problem, though. You see, with the other X-Men team in Russia, they have the mini Cerebro to help them locate Charles Xavier. But for this X-Men team, they don't have a mini Cerebro. So they have to use the abilities of Wolverine to hopefully find Charles Xavier in the city somewhere. So while you do have the X-Men walking around to hopefully find Charles Xavier, we see the Beta Cerebro just walking around this area, San Francisco, trying to find Charles Xavier, but it's also finding other mutants as well. So you do have a Cerebrite, this Beta Cerebro, being able to find this young girl who is a mutant. Now, once it does find her, it tags her, catalogs her in its database, and then leads to continue its search for Charles Xavier. Now, we do get a few pages where we're seeing the X-Men right now just walking around San Francisco. Now, while you have the X-Men walking around San Francisco to hopefully find Charles Xavier, it's also them being able to find some clues, but also some conversations happen here as well. Like, for example, the idea of Marrow not liking Kitty Pryde. And the reason why, because to Marrow, she's a mutant like Kitty Pryde, but her mutation had changed her body appearance. For Kitty Pryde, she can still pretend to be a regular human, and people won't notice so easily that she is a mutant. Now, with all that being said, for Wolverine and Kitty Pryde, even though they do find some clues that could possibly help them to locate Charles Xavier, for Wolverine, he's now no longer able to pick up on the scent of Charles Xavier. And so for Wolverine, luckily for the team, they do have somebody, one of his old friends, that could possibly help him locate the professor. But now we shift over to Utah for like one page, and we now pick up with Cerebro, or Cerebro Bright Beta, and we see it breaking into this government base and being able to steal some piece of technology just like that in a matter of a few seconds. Now, getting back over to the X-Men team, we do see Wolverine find his buddy, who basically has information on anybody if they ever went through his part of San Francisco, and that would be Black Crane. Now, for Black Crane, unfortunately, we don't learn much about his character, and when I try to go online and find more information about him, well, he only appears in 2 books. This one and a Deadpool book where he dies in. So unfortunately, there's not really much about this character, but he does kind of give our heroes a hint of where they could possibly find Charles Xavier. And that would be Alcatraz Island. So for our heroes, they now gotta head over there. Except when the X-Men do arrive there, they're then confronted by the Brotherhood of Mutants. Not the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, it's Brotherhood of Mutants. And that would be Mimic, Post, Toad, and the Blob. Now, here's the thing, because these guys are really able to bring down our X-Men team. And here's the reason why. Because they have been getting trained by Charles Xavier. And so at first, you have the X-Men kind of wondering, like, what in the world is going on here? Why aren't we able to bring these guys down? Like, it's Blob and Toad. Mimic, I understand. Post, also understand. But Blob and Toad, they should be somewhat easy for us to take down, but they got training. And so as the battle goes on, you then have the X-Men realize that yes, Charles Xavier is here at the moment. But once you do have the X-Men realize that Charles Xavier is there, you then have Charles inform his old students that he no longer has his abilities, that thanks to X-Men Onslaught, he had officially lost his powers. Now, with that being said, for the Brotherhood of Mutants, they went out of their way to break him free from the Hulkbuster base. And the reason why, because, well, he's a great teacher. But while being with the Brotherhood, they also begin the process of trying to protect him from something coming after Charles Xavier. And for Kitty Pryde, she realized that there is a lot of fear in the voice of Charles, in his eyes. And so she's kind of wondering what in the world has scared Charles so much. And that is when the wall just busts down and you have Cerebro Beta appear right there, ready to grab Charles Xavier. And so as we get into X-Men issue number 83, we're now picking up with Cerebrite Alpha. Now, Cerebrite Alpha is the one in Russia. Beta is the one in San Francisco right now fighting against Wolverine's team. Now, for Alpha, we're seeing him beat down Storm's team at the moment. Now, for Nina, she does go out of her way to use her abilities to wake up Rogue, to wake up Gambit, to get those 2 characters back in the battle again so that they can find a way to defeat this Cerebrite Alpha. Unfortunately, they can't. So now their main goal is to retreat. Now, luckily for the team, you have Gambit and also Storm being able to work together to kind of set off a small explosion to give the team some time to retreat, to get far away from Cerebrite Alpha. But now we had to switch over to Cerebro, the main unit. And we see right now for Cerebro, he has taken over this Liberty Electric Authority building that's technically used as a way to power up a huge portion of the eastern coast of America. But right now it's him just cataloging humans one by one, trying to achieve the goals of Charles Xavier. Now, as we get back over to Storm team, this is where we learn, like, okay, How in the world did the X-Men pick up on two different energy signatures of Charles Xavier, one in Russia and one in San Francisco? Nina. When it came to Nina, she kind of like took the template of Charles' mind and put it in her own mind as well. And so because of that, when it came to the X-Men using a different version of Cerebro, they have picked up on her and Charles Xavier. And so that's why they're currently here in Russia at the moment. Now, we also learn here that apparently Cerebrite Alpha has been trying its best to get to Nina because it believes that Nina is Charles Xavier. But then while they're talking, you then have Cerebrite Alpha being able to combine with Colossus. So now we're getting Colossus Cerebrite Alpha. Honestly, sounds kind of cool. But anyways, you now have Colossus being used to fight against Storm, to fight against Gambit. In matter of fact, he does defeat them. Now for Rogue, she grabbed Nina, she grabbed Renee to get the heck out of there. The problem is that while they're trying to run away, Nina can feel what's happening to Storm, what's happening to Gambit. They're being defeated by Colossus. And so Rogue puts down Renee and Nina and goes back. Now for Rogue, it's the idea that with Nina's mind being connected to Gambit, she knows that Gambit does love Rogue. And so for Rogue, hearing those words from Nina, she's kind of like, okay, cool. There is my confirmation. But either way, I got to go back and help the rest of the team out. And so she does. And for a brief moment, we check in on the San Francisco team. Honestly, all we see there is that you have Wolverine's team now working alongside with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants to fight against, well, Cerebrite Beta. But getting back on the Storm team, we do see Rogue arrive. Now, you do have Rogue being able to touch the mind of Gambit. Sorry, she touched the face of Gambit, but of course, she does absorb his memories as well. And so with her doing that, she just learned about the other secret that Gambit is currently holding from her. But she's then attacked from behind by Cerebrite Alpha, completely taken out. And so this chapter ends with the idea of the entire X-Men team in Russia, but also Renee being completely knocked out, and Nina has been grabbed by Cerebrite Beta. Now, when we switch over into Uncanny X-Men issue number 364, the 5th chapter of the storyline, we pick up with Cerebro, the main unit. And right now it's him just kind of see what's going on when it comes to all the different mutants that he is currently overwatching. Now, the problem is right now is that his base is detected. And so for Cerebro, what he does, blows the place up. He's kind of, you know what? Files, they're coming with me. My fake X-Men can stay here and also die with the base as well. But for right now, I got to get the heck out of here. So you see him just walk out. And so now we're able to switch over to Wolverine's team, and also they're working with the Brotherhood. And so they're trying their best to work together to defeat the Cerebrite Beta. But the problem is Beta is just too strong. You have two teams of characters who are really powerful. Post was a hero to Onslaught in the Onslaught event, who took down a good chunk of the X-Men. Like, Post is a powerful character. Nope, does not stand a chance. Blob there, Wolverine, Marrow, Kitty Pryde, Nightcrawler. Now, Nightcrawler, Marrow, Kitty Pryde, they're not really hard hitters, but still, it's the idea that you have all these different characters, but unfortunately, it doesn't matter. Now, there is another problem with this battle, though, because you do have the Brotherhood not wanting to give Charles Xavier away, because when you do have Kitty Pryde trying her best to get Charles out of the battle, you have Post get very upset and tell her, let him go. They want to keep him for themselves here, but also at the same time, they're trying to work with the X-Men to bring down Cerebrite Beta. Now, there is unfortunately a death in the storyline, and that would be Toad. Toad gets blasted, and we're kind of left to believe at first that Toad is officially dead. And unfortunately for the X-Men and the Brotherhood, they don't have any time to mourn the death of Toad. Like, Toad is now officially off the board. It's now time to continue to battle against this thing. The problem is that for Nightcrawler, he realized they're going to need some backup. So he tries to call the other X-Men team that's currently in Russia. But the problem is that they're fighting another Cerebrite over there, Alpha. And so right now, This team's on their own and they're failing. They're not really able to continue on with this battle. Now, you do have the Brotherhood begin to explain what's going on to this X-Men team, the idea of Cerebro Beta, that it was created by Cerebro. It's the idea that when it came to Bastion back in Operation Zero Tolerance, and we saw this, Homeboy went over to school of Charles Xavier and tried to download all the different files of the X-Men, but also other mutants across the world that Charles knew about, but also kept that information inside Cerebro. Something happened when it came to that virus that Bastion uploaded, where of course it turned Cerebro into this sentient being now trying to achieve some kind of goal in a sick way for Charles Xavier. But right after you have Blob explain things to us, but also to the X-Men team here, you then have Cerebro Beta begin to fight against the X-Men and also the Brotherhood all over again. Now, here's the thing. We do get to supposed death. And the reason why I say supposed death is not because it's Marvel comics or comics overall, the idea of characters never truly stay dead in comics. It's the idea that when you have Kitty Pryde and Mimic both get hit by Cerebro Beta, you have the heroes believe at first they just lost Mimic and Kitty Pryde like they did with Toad. But you did have Charles say, no, I felt it. They're not actually killed off. They were moved, most likely moved over to where Cerebro is at currently. And so now for our heroes, their main goal is to find a way to get over to him, to get over to Cerebro. And you do have the chapter end on the note where you have Nightcrawler come back with the Blackbird. The problem is that when he does come back, he sees Wolverine, Marrow, and also Charles Xavier all get hit with the same blast as Mimic, Toad, and Kitty Pryde did earlier. So he's kind of left to believe that his friends had just died possibly. But his main goal now is to find the rest of the X-Men, the ones in Russia right now, to get their help to hopefully bring down Cerebro. And so as we enter the final chapter of the storyline, we're now seeing Cerebro meeting Charles Xavier. Now for Charles Xavier, he wants to understand like what's going on with Cerebro. Like what is it trying to fully achieve here at the moment? And it says it wants to bond with Charles Xavier. And once that is done, they'll then be able to finally achieve his goal, but also bring peace to the entire world as well. Now, we also see here that for Nightcrawler, he was able to pick up the rest of the X-Men team who were in Russia. Now, with him doing that on his way over to where Charles Xavier and the rest of the X-Men are currently being held at, we also learn here that Storm was captured like Wolverine, Marrow, Kitty Pryde, and Charles Xavier. And so right now for Nightcrawler, he's kind of hoping to save Charles Xavier and bring down Cerebro. The problem is that they're attacked by Alpha and Beta on their way over to where Charles is at. You see, when it comes to Cerebro, it does explain things to Charles Xavier. The idea of like how the world is right now alive and sanctioned. And so you have Charles Xavier find out here that for Cerebro, when it came to Charles Xavier, he made sure it had some kind of security protocol to make sure it would not fall into the wrong hands, like Bastion. The problem was that it kind of uploaded itself into a Prime Sentinel. And so with the combination of the Prime Sentinel and also Cerebro, it was able to come sanctioned and begin its work on trying to achieve Charles Xavier's goal. Now, what I want to do right now is catalog all the different humans across the world. Once that's done right there, every single human will no longer cease to exist. Now, luckily for Charles Xavier, the X-Men do arrive. And so this kind of begins the process of the story winding down, because once you do have the X-Men trying their best to fight against Cerebro, well, you did have Charles Xavier begin to talk to Nina, because the idea of Nina being there, she should be able to restore the powers of Charles Xavier. And with his powers being resolved, it begins the process of Charles Xavier finding a way to bring down Cerebro, but also saving the entire world as well. And once you do have the rest of the X-Men being able to free themselves after being captured by Cerebro earlier, it's now the entire X-Men team going up against Cerebro. But here's the problem though. You see, for Cerebro, he has the Xavier protocols. Now, we have talked about this in the past. The idea of the Xavier protocols is really more of like different files on different members of the X-Men and how to defeat them. And so when it comes to Cerebro, it has those files and begins to just butcher the X-Men. Now, we already know this right now is not true at all. And matter of fact, it's Charles Xavier being able to play some mind games on Cerebro, but with the help of Nina. Because Nina is a Midnight, kind of like this computer-human hybrid. And so she was able to use her power as a way to access the computer mind of Cerebro and allow herself to play mind games with Cerebro. The X-Men did not die. They are alive and well. And so this leads into another battle, right? But here's the thing, because you also have Charles Xavier being able to use his powers to help the X-Men locate the right parts in all Cerebros to bring it down. Now, the problem is, though, for Cerebro, it's a computer. So it has the ability to just come back to life again over and over again if it wants to, truthfully. But you didn't have Charles say, you know what? I have the best idea to show you that your plan is completely wrong. Because you have Charles use Nina's powers again, connect his mind with Cerebro's mind. And once that's done right there, you have Charles take Cerebro into the astral realm so that it can then scan all the minds across the world. Because for Charles, what he wants to show Cerebro is that all humans are special, that all humans cannot be forced in one direction. They have to be guided in that way you want them to go. It's all the idea that humans can change and bring betterment into this world, bring peace into this world. And so once you have Cerebro realize that humans are special, it basically dies in the arms of Charles Xavier. But understand what Charles is trying to achieve by bringing peace in the world between mutants and humans, but by guiding them, not by forcing it. And so once you do have Cerebro realize what Charles is trying to do, it basically dies and it goes away. And so you then have the X-Men now being able to, well, bring Charles Xavier back home, and the storyline ends on that note. And so with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.